How's everybody doing? Sorry, I am nervous for the first time in a while since I have three guests today. Well, one co-host and two guests who I will bring in one by one. First, joining us from parts unknown in the Southeast, Michael Vi. Michael,
Hi, Joe.
thank you for being here again.
Good to be here.
Yeah, and next up, all the way from Canada, researcher, author, investigator Grant Cameron. Grant, thank you for being here.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for having me on.
And finally, the man, the myth, Chase Williams.
I really appreciate you guys having me. I haven't done anything, but I'll talk about my experiences and answer any questions any of you might have.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to start off by saying, I'm going to rewind back to 1997 in June. I was listening to Art Bell, Coast to Coast, in the middle of the night. I had to work the next day, but it didn't matter because I would stay up till 5 or 6 a.m. listening. And then he had Stephen Greer on, and it was June or May. It was May of 1997, and Greer had just spoken about he had briefings in April of that year in 97. They went on Capitol Hill. He says we also gave a briefing to a joint chief staff's level fella, and it was received very well. And I'm like, he gave a briefing, to a joint chiefs guy? Really? So that was the first time I heard of Greer speaking with somebody at that level. And then let's fast forward to 2018, and Grant, pick it up from there.
Okay, so I'm at the StarWorks conference in Laughlin, Nevada. I'm with my assistant, Desta Barnaby. We're about to head to Tucson, Arizona, which is a long drive. We had to be there for dinner. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm just about ready to go. And Desta comes up. She's all upset. She said, you had a meeting at 10 o'clock. Where were you? I was trying to phone you. And I said, well, I've been on the main floor of the casino for that time. And there's no Wi-Fi. So I didn't get anything she was giving me. And she said, James wants to talk to you. It's really important. And he wanted a meeting. And I said, well, we got to go. We got to be in Tucson. And so then we were getting ready to go. And all of a sudden, James Rigney walks up and he says, I need to talk to you. And I said, well, we're heading to Tucson. Maybe we can do this another time. And he said, no, I really need to talk to you. It's important. I said, well, we're heading out the door. I mean, whatever you got, mail me, because he's talking to you this document. And he said, give me 10 minutes. That's what he said to me. Give me 10 minutes. I said, okay, I'll give you 10 minutes. So I sat down. He pulled out this iPad, and his wife he phoned his wife or contacted his wife, and she had put the Wilson Leak document, the pages. She had faxed the document to him. And he gave me the iPad, and then he went wandering off. And I took a look at the first page of the document. And as I've always pointed out, I've never really read the document, but I did read the first page. So I got the first page, and I looked, and I saw Oak Shannon's name on the front page, and I saw Eric Davis's name. And I thought, holy cow. And I said to him, where did you get this? And I was absolutely floored. And then he told me it had come out of the Edgar Mitchell collection, and he walked off, and I was sitting there with this iPad looking at this document, and I knew Oak Shannon because at the time when the Wilson Leak document had been leaked 2002, or when it had been done, I was in contact with Eric Davis. I had conversations with him, personal conversations with him in Las Vegas, and he had given me the notes from the famous John Alexander meeting from 1985, where all these special compartmentalized information people were there, and they were trying to figure out UFOs. They're trying to get funding for a project. Well, Oak Shannon was there, and Eric Davis had given me about 27 pages of his notes from that meeting. And he said, when Oak Shannon dies, you can drop these documents. You can release these documents. Now, Oak Shannon is still alive. So when I saw Oak Shannon's name and Eric Davis's name on there, I knew this was for real, because I knew Oak Shannon was. And that's when I thought to myself, well, can I photograph this iPad? Is James going to come back while I'm photographing it? And I was just desperate to get this document. And then when he gave me the document, that was about 3 or 4 weeks later, he gave me the document. That's when I learned it was 15 pages. I thought it was only like 2 pages. And I promised him I would put it in a book because he wanted it out. and I was going to put it in Managing Magic 2, which we never did publish. We had it almost done, and we lost the footnotes in an edit. And we were going to put it. I told him I put it in the book. So we're trying to recover these footnotes, and that is when I was contacted by Chase, and I didn't know what to do with the document. I couldn't put them in the book, and I was very, very afraid to put them on the internet because I was good friends with almost everybody that was in the document. I knew all these people, and it was sort of like, you know, sinking your own ship or going after your own teammates and stuff like that. And I just didn't know what to do with the document, and that's when Chase came up and contacted me.
And yeah, and I had heard, you know, I forgot about the story. I did, and I'm fast forwarding a little bit. I did visit with Will Miller in 2007, whose letter is in the Wilson notes. And I went to his house. Unfortunately, I had a good friend with me who had no interest in UFOs at the time. I so wanted to ask him specifically about that briefing that Greer claimed he had given, but I didn't ask him. I was waiting for something negative from Will about Greer. That never came. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, the story is still alive. And then 2019, Giuliano Marinkovic, who has done amazing work on this, he goes, check this out. And I look at it. He gives us the link to Reddit, not Imgur, but to Reddit, where somebody had put it on Reddit after, you know, linking to Imgur. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I know what this is. Yeah, I do know what this is. And I heard that you had them. You had something you wanted to get out. I didn't know what it was. And then Chase, tell us what happened when Grant contacted you.
Well, I had an interesting experience that led me to reach out to all of my favorite ufologists in the field. Grant being numero uno, still is, and I consider Grant a good friend. But at that point, we hadn't met, so I think I messaged you, Grant, maybe a dozen or so times before he responded, and I think he was just busy. And we talked about that experience, and then we had a relationship for a while before the Wilson documents were brought up. You know, I think, I don't know how many, maybe a few months or something, but Grant asked me to leak those for him, and he told me the situation that he just explained to the audience. And you know, I put him on Imgur and just created an account and uploaded them. That's why I say I didn't really do anything. They needed to be out. They're very intriguing. It's intriguing documentation, but the story is pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah, I can add one thing to that. That when I was talking to you about these, I had decided at that point I couldn't drop myself, but I'm a disclosure guy, so I really don't keep very much secret. So I decided that because I'd gotten a phone call from James Ian Dolly. I had talked to him. He was following me. I was talking about this document back in December the year before. I was saying this thing's going to drop, and when it drops, the cover up is over. And I was, you know, hinting that I had this document or whatever. And I couldn't leak it. But then I decided, well, I'm a disclosure guy. So anybody that wants to see the document, when James asked me, he said, I think the document is on the internet. And I said, how many pages is it? And he said, 15. And I said, yeah, that kind of sounds like it. I didn't want to play that I had the document. It was the same document. And then he said, can I get a copy of the document? And I said, no. And then I thought, after I got off that conversation with him, I thought, well, that's pretty stupid. I mean, this is a disclosure thing. I'm just going to give the document to anybody that wants it. So when I mentioned to Chase, he said, oh, can I see it? I said, yeah, sure. I sent it to him. And then I told him the story about I couldn't leak it. And I still remember Chase saying, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And then Chase, remember you phoned me from the elevator in Chicago and you said, I think those documents that you gave me, I think they're on the internet. And I went, and then I got scared. I went, holy cow, you know, because I didn't know what was going to happen, whether, you know, I was going to, you know, I was at, yeah, in fact, I actually went to the lawyer. I can't forget his name.
Michael
Hill.
Hall.
So I went to him and I said, well, I got this. I gave him the document and I gave him a bunch of documents. So that if I die, there's a bunch of documents that are going to drop on the internet. And that was the thing. He was going to provide these documents. So I gave him the document and I was telling him, I said, yeah, I'm pretty scared. You know, this thing's out. You know, could they sue me? And he goes, yeah, they could probably sue you. And I went, what? They could sue me? Like I was just freaking out, man. The whole time I had that document, I couldn't sleep. I didn't know what to do with the document. And yet I hadn't really read it, but I knew it was important that, Eric Davis to me was one of the sharpest guys I've ever met. He had this intelligence background. He was talking to these very high level people. And in fact, I talked at one time about who he's talking to, and he got really upset with me. And basically after that, really didn't talk to me too much. Talked about intelligence blowback, that when documents like this drop, then everybody heads for cover. And he called it intelligence blowback. You got to see who's going to lose their job, what's going to happen, who's going to get investigated and stuff like that. So I knew there would be these repercussions with this document. And I'm really not sure what happened, but I was pretty scared when I had that document.
Yeah, and 2000, I think I met Eric 2018 on George Knapp's Facebook, and we were arguing about the Bob Lazar upcoming documentary on, that Jeremy Corbell was about to put out. And Eric is very negative on Lazar, and I said, let's see what the documentary is. He goes, I don't need to see the documentary. I'm like, you kind of need to see the documentary before you can comment on the documentary. So we went back and forth, and then we communicated privately, and I became friends with them. So when Giuliano put these notes, he showed us that they were on Reddit. It was Danny Silva, Giuliano, and Chris Wolford, and we were like, I know Eric really well at this point. I'm becoming friends with him. They know people. It's the same thing. I don't want to hurt this guy. I'm like, is this going to hurt him at all? I don't want to put it out. I mean, I know for disclosure, yes, but I asked Eric. I said, do you know about this? And he said no comment. And he never says no comment because he's so talkative. So yeah, I was worried about that. That was it, because people were mad at us for not putting it out right away. I'm like, I'm sorry. I mean, I care more about the person than the story right now. But eventually it will come out. But then it was shown, somebody, I think it was Teresa Tyndall, put it on Twitter, and that was it. We all went at it. Michael, thoughts on anything and any questions you have?
I'm enjoying the ride. It's an interesting story for sure. There is, I think we talked about it one or two shows in the past, where anything that happens for cleared employees to get involved in a story that's out there in the wild, that is really a no-no. One that's known inside to be, a validated program of record. So I can imagine the sensitivities around Eric Davis, the whole crew, if you will. There's all this speculation over the years, over the more recent time here, where who, if anyone, is authorized, green lighted. I find it very surprising that Eric Davis has said and feels he can say the things that he says. There are classified facts that he alludes to, that he apparently has briefed elected officials. And there's a limit to where you can go with that in open public statements. And I'm not being accusatory at all of him. I'm just saying I find it really interesting that the things Eric Davis says, it's tying 2 and 2 together to come up with 4, really. The things that Hal Puthoff says and others is writing on the wall, right? So on the one hand, and then when you throw in the Wilson Davis notes, I have I guess I'm going to go there a little bit. I have a close friend, a retired Navy friend, who was basically Tom Wilson's executive officer at one point in their career at an overseas site that I won't name. But he's, waiting for the annual sojourn of Wilson and his wife to stop by somewhere on the eastern seaboard to see this friend of mine, and he's just going to outright ask him. They were very close, and still are, and he finds it fascinating. This friend of mine, he's not yet had that conversation with Wilson, or he would have told me. So I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. Is the shoe going to be on the hill, or is the shoe going to be in the garage / man cave hangout of my friend over in Virginia? So we'll see.
Can I tell another important story that links into this thing?
Yes.
That I've told before, that I had the document back in December of whatever it was, 2018. And I was telling James that I was having a hard time sleeping and I didn't know what to do with the document, stuff like that. And then he phones me up and he said, did you give Dolan the document? Did you give Dolan the document? And I said, no. He said, you must have given it to him. He's got the document. And I said, no, he's not. And I didn't give it to him. And then he said, he's on Jimmy Church talking about it. So this is December of 2018. I think it's December the 19th or 18th or something. He's doing a show and he's talking about the document. He's talking about this document that he was shown, 2 pages of this document. And then I'm thinking, he's talking the same document. I said, how do you get the document? So I know it's real because I talked to, and I think Silva has talked about this, but when he got the document, of course, the first thing he did is phone the guy who showed him 2 pages of the document and said, hey, I got this document, and basically got a confirmation. So I knew right from day one this was for real, because you go back to this interview and it's way before it went public. It was 6 months before it went public. You can hear Dolan, and it's quite clear he's talking about the Wilson Leak document, that he was shown 2 pages of this document a couple of years before.
Yeah, and it's like, I know you know who that person is. I know who that person is. Chase, I think you know who that person is. Chase, do you have any, I know you have an opinion. What's your opinion on Wilson Davis as far as the meeting taking place between Davis and Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no, I'm not a human lie detector, but I think, each of us have a pretty decent ability to determine if things are falsified or fictionalized. I don't see anything with these documents that make me think that they're fiction or that they've been embellished in any way. They seem legitimate. There aren't any real miraculous or outstanding claims in the documents. I mean, if everything went down the way that it's detailed in the documents that Eric supposedly took, they basically say that it's in a hangar and they haven't made any real progress on working through and reverse engineering the technology, which isn't really a surprise to me. I mentioned to Joe, Grant, and Michael, you probably haven't heard this story, but when I was 15, I had an experience with a triangle that was flying inverted to grade, perpendicular to grade, about 100 feet off the ground. It was moving about a mile a minute. It was about 150 feet away from me. And it was about the size of 2 football fields. And I know that sounds cliche, but I have electrical engineering, mechanical engineering background, AI, ML, certs from MIT, and work in cutting edge technology. And I've worked with some DoD projects, and I couldn't possibly explain how this thing operated. And I've sat down with a 3-star that we're all familiar with, and he explained to me how this triangular craft functioned. And again, I understand there are people out there that can lie really well, and there are people out there that do that, but I haven't picked up on any of that with respect to the document or with respect to the conversations that I've had in our community. And I have my own personal experiences aside from the triangle that lead me to believe that all of this is very, very real. A lot of it is not terrestrial based, or if it is terrestrial based, it's something that we don't completely understand. And I think those answers are things that we've all said with respect to these experiences. They're all things that have been alluded to by that individual that I mentioned and others in the community as well. So the short of that is, to answer your question, Joe, no, I don't think these are falsified. I think they're legitimate documents. I think that it makes perfect sense if things are interacting with us, that we would at some point gain access to that material, or we would have means to gain access to that material. I always, I have other friends in DoD that I frequently have conversations with, good friends of mine, lifelong friends. And one of the conversations always revolves around, the idea that these things are buzzing past nuclear facilities on a monthly basis, and they have been for decades. And I can't possibly explain. I couldn't possibly understand how someone could be responsible for a multi-billion-dollar facilities, and have that occur, and then just say, "Don't worry about it. We don't understand it. Don't know what it is. We're not going to do anything about it." That's not the case. That won't ever be the case. So, I mean, I would bet my life that if these things are occurring, that there are individuals that are very well organized, very well funded, very well capable of trying to figure out what is messing with their stuff, right? We're not going to put a 50 caliber machine gun in our driveway, and if somebody walks by the machine gun and messes with our gun, we're not just going to say, "Oh, well," we're going to put up a fence, we're going to put up gates, we're going to put up cameras. We're not going to let that happen again, or we're going to do our damn best not to let it happen again. So, I think they're legitimate. Pretty long-winded there. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. We have no limit on time. Whenever you guys have to go, just let me know. Michael says the same thing to me all the time. He goes, darn well they're studying this. They've been studying it for a long time, no matter what they say. Just real fast for people who don't know Wilson Davis. So 1997, Greer, Edgar Mitchell, Will Miller, Sherry Adamiak, who was Greer's assistant, and then Stephen Lufkin, who was an alleged Roswell-era witness. They go into the Pentagon. They brief the Joint Chiefs of Staff, head of intelligence, I think he's the deputy head of intelligence, Admiral Thomas Wilson, who later became the head of the DIA. Allegedly, he goes searching, finds this crash retrieval program, and then that's 97. And then 2002, Eric Davis, who had been laid off from NIDS earlier in the year, goes and interviews Wilson in Las Vegas in the parking lot of the EG&G building. Oak Shannon was a big person who set up the meeting because he knew Davis. He vouched for Davis to Wilson. Wilson apparently wanted to get it off his chest. Needed help trying to, find out where this program was. Not where it was, but, trying to get the program out. And he let Davis interview him in October 16, 2002. And then those documents went to Edgar Mitchell, I believe Hal Puthoff, and some other folks. I don't think it was just NIDS folks. I just think Eric was close with Hal. And this is me speculating, and also Edgar Mitchell was part of the original 97 briefing. So, and if it wasn't for Edgar Mitchell passing away, we wouldn't have had these documents. He passed away in 2016, I think. Grant, is that true? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, you could be about that. Yeah.
So that was that. And there's a lot of information. There's no proof that the meeting happened. But if you look on my blog, you look at Grant's work, you look at Richard Dolan's work, James Iandoli's work, Project Unity's work, it's pretty clear to all of us that the meeting took place. But there are still some people who are totally in doubt about it, and which I don't understand. But I think that hopefully within the year or two next year, we find out for sure, so people we can get on with where is the crash retrieval program. My information is they have located the crash retrieval program. Now, whether or not they have access to it, I don't know. And one thing, I did get Chase's name from Nicole Sackich last year, so thanks to Nicole for that, because I didn't know who Chase was. Nobody really know. I know, Grant, you're like, people know him, but people don't know who Chase is. They didn't know who leaked it. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, Chase had his own pod. You still have the podcast, Chase?
No, Jeff is still running Strange Recon, but I'm still available to talk to whoever. That was never my endeavor. That was Jeff's. But I thoroughly enjoy participating in the community. I obviously enjoy connecting with others that think about the same kind of thing. So, yeah.
Because we did a lot of interviews together. That was why I said everybody knows Chase, because I don't know how many interviews we did, 6 interviews or whatever between your channel and my channel, and we were going back and forth, and some of them were like 4.5 hours long, where we were gabbing away about stuff.
Yeah, that's mostly that's you, Grant.
Yeah. Let me add another thing that the two things I want to talk about. One was the controversial part at the end of the document, but first, the other thing that people really don't know is that Chase, I also gave him the alien autopsy document, which interested me more than the Wilson document, and you put that one up as well. But that thing didn't go anywhere. I mean, everybody sort of talked about it for a little while, and Kit Green confirmed it was real, and then it sort of died. And I thought that was the really interesting document, that they actually may have had a body. And that, because I always heard the story, I think it was from Eric, that Kit Green was briefed on a lot of stuff, but he could never get briefed into the alien autopsy part of the program. And he was desperate to try to get into that part of the program, and he wasn't able to get briefed. I'm pretty sure it was Eric told me that story back around that time. So when I saw this whole thing with the alien autopsy, and that Kit Green was involved, and that he had written a memo. So that's what I know from my experience, because as I said, I was talking to Eric Davis when he got laid off from NIDS. I had a personal conversation with him in Las Vegas, and they were looking for documents. They were looking for all sorts of stuff. You know, they did the black triangles, they did the cattle mutilations, and they were talking to me about the Holloman Air Force Base film, and that the whole Robert Emmenegger and the videos and the documentaries that Emmenegger had done for the government. They were very interested in that whole thing, and I had been involved with Robert Emmenegger in that story. So the NIDS people were talking to me, and they were going after a lot of stuff. So when you see the alien autopsy, it's almost like they say, let's look at the alien autopsy. Is this real or not? And they send out a bunch, they start this program, and Eric is writing back to Bigelow, making a report. And that's what, to me, these documents were reports going back to NIDS about these many programs that I knew that they were running, because they basically had 4 meetings a year where they would bring these people in, like Kit Green, Hal Puthoff and stuff, the best minds that they could find, and they would go after these various projects. And Eric, they limited it down to 3 a year, then 2 meetings a year. Then Eric got laid off, and they eventually folded NIDS. But he would tell me about these meetings, and that's where his was. He wasn't really a member of NIDS. He was the chief physicist, but he got to meet all these guys. He got to, rub shoulders with Eric Davis, or Kit Green and Jacques Vallée and all these things. And that's where Eric got all this information, because Bigelow was bringing in the best minds of the country and paying them huge money to come in for weekends where they would do these almost like a think tank type thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention is at the end of the document that I was very interested in, this very controversial part. One was the idea where it says no abductions. And I remember everybody said, oh, that's counterintelligence. They're telling them the wrong thing or whatever. And so I went and looked, and I found actually it was Giuliano who found the reference that Edgar Mitchell said the same thing. Then I found Giuliano helped me find the reference on a website where Kit Green says the same thing, no abductions ever. So it was the same thing. It was this idea that abductions are probably going to be much more complex than we think. It's going to be involved some sort of mental thing where it looks real, like the world is flat, the sun's going around the earth, but it's not. It's something, the event is happening, but it's not what we think it is. And the other was when they said in the document, we have a craft, we think it will fly. As soon as I said that, I said, oh, they've got the intact craft, and they can't turn it on because it has a consciousness interface. You need consciousness to turn the craft on. Because I'm coming up with a book. I'm just coming out with a book called The Alien UFO Sky Pilots, where I look at 36 people who have claimed to have flown the craft. And they all tell basically the same story. The craft is alive. You put your hand on a panel, you put your hand on a ball, different things. You become one with the craft. The craft is alive. Whatever you think is what the craft does, and the craft will go anywhere. And the other thing that even Hal Puthoff talked about was this idea that when you go to the craft, it's like 30 feet across, and you go inside, and it's the size of a football stadium. And you go back out and you look, and it's 30 feet across. And people report this kind of stuff as well. This idea that they can make the inside as big as they want. And this kind of technology that's way ahead of what we've got. Even what Eric Davis said when he was talking about the Lazar thing at one time, he said the guy's totally full of it, and this stuff is not even at Area 51. I think he was on George Knapp's show and he said that, and the stuff is not even at Area 51. And then I think George Knapp said, oh, I think we know what the headline is for tomorrow. So Eric knew a lot of stuff, and he's the one that put up this deal that other people have talked about, that the material is sort of shelved. They can't really get anywhere with it. And they put it on the shelf for 6 or 7 years, then they look at it again, take it off the shelf, put it back on the shelf. And he's mentioned that, and other people have mentioned that as well. The idea of the core story, that we've got material, something is happening, but we're not doing very well with the back engineering. And when you see this kind of stuff where we've got reports of guys saying they go in 1 second from here to like 50,000 light years outside the Milky Way in 1 second. I mean, they've got some technology that we haven't got anything close to what they've got. and it's this consciousness interface. When I saw that thing that they had a craft that they think would fly, I immediately knew that they couldn't start it, they couldn't get it going, even though they have an intact craft.
And what's interesting is in the documents, there's the Will Miller letter to Eric Davis. It was just earlier that year in 2002, and he tries to put Davis in contact with people who deal with alien reproduction vehicles. And then I did become friends with Will in 2000, and we stayed in contact. And then a couple of years ago, when the documents came online, I contacted him. I'm like, Will, can I interview you? He's like, yeah, of course. He goes, what about? I go, Wilson Davis. He's like, yeah. It's like, so he goes, email me a couple of questions. I'm like, oh man. I'm like, what couple of questions can I come up with? Just 2 questions. He's like, no, just emailing it doesn't have to be 2, emailing me your questions. So I just went through everything and he answered almost everything. He believes we have a craft that can go anywhere in the universe, anytime. So traveling time. So that's the opposite of what Eric Davis would say, but that doesn't mean we've cracked the intact craft. It could be that craft could be totally related to consciousness. They may have something else they figured out. I don't know. I mean, when I mentioned that we may have cracked gravity, I mean, Nick Cook even says he thinks we may have, just on a hunch, the guy who worked for Jane's Defense. It's a battle and people get upset. And Michael had a sighting in 92, which he can go over briefly, which he thinks was our tech. Michael?
Well, based on the circumstances, it wasn't from me, from the physical observation of this air vehicle that I said, oh, that looks like U.S. manufactured technology. It was based on the setting. This thing flew, in case folks haven't heard, I'll just quickly recap. It was midday in the Persian Gulf. I was on board an Aegis cruiser that was about 150 feet and connected with lines, cables, and hoses to the aircraft carrier next to us on the port side, on the left side. And we were exchanging fuel. I don't know who was giving what to whom, but typically it would be the carrier topping up maybe the cruiser. But either way, this activity was going on. There were loads of people on deck supporting it. And this perfectly triangular craft flew exactly as if it had spotted us from above on the surface of the ocean and followed the wake right up to the point that it came directly from behind, directly overhead, overtook us and passed out of view within about 10 seconds. Couldn't have been more than 10,000 feet altitude. It was really hazy in that region, super humid, but these in each corner, these exceedingly bright dots pierced this haze, unlike anything. I mean, I'd watched target practice, helicopters, aircraft flying around in that region, and except for like a landing light of an aircraft turning on final to land on the carrier, I mean, that it will pierce, as it's supposed to do to some extent. It'll pierce that haze. These 3 bright dots were piercing that haze, almost like they were welder's arc intensity. But the astonishing thing was, with all the capability and the responsibility of that battle group and that ship I was on for the air defense of that aircraft carrier, I refer to it as nobody even twitched. This thing passed directly overhead. There were no flight ops going on. You don't do flight ops when you're doing an underway replenishment like that, when you're connected. And then just minutes later, I was back down below deck in my work center, which is an actual skiff, and it has a radar, what we call a radar table. It's a representation, it's a data feed off of the combat center radar on the Aegis. And I looked for this on the radar, and it had just been a couple of minutes, and it wasn't going, in my estimation, it wasn't going any more than maybe 350, 400 knots, maybe 500, I don't know. But I mean, it should have still been well within the envelope, if you will, viewability on this radar. Everything else was still visible on the radar. And I don't know, I'd have to speak to someone that's an Aegis radar expert about if you have a known track that you want to obfuscate or null the track, delete the track. I don't know how you do that. I would think that would get a little screwy, possibly, add a lot of risk to any scenario if you've got the capability of people to nullify tracks that you really need to have a sort of an all-seeing eye when you're out in that one of the most contested regions of the world. So anyway, this thing wasn't on radar. It had flown direct. And no, there was no reaction whatsoever. So having observed flight operations in that area for quite some time, and being responsible in the job that I had for knowing what was in the air and knowing, being able to characterize it in case someone in combat misconstrued what was going on. In other words, a civilian airliner or an allied aircraft that was loitering in the area. I might have to help deconflict and possibly avert some sort of catastrophe from an air defense standpoint. And I've been out on deck so much and I've seen so many aircraft operating in the area of all types, ours, other nations, civilian, and you learn where you are in the region. Persian Gulf, you could practically skip a stone across it. You've got nations all around. You've got airports, commercial airports, military runways all over the place, and you get a sense when you visually spot an aircraft, whether it's descending on a flight profile into Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Bahrain, Dhahran, or wherever, or whether it's climbing out after takeoff. And this air vehicle, I call it, because it was not an airplane. My sense was that it was climbing in a shallow climb, but that's just pure speculation. I can't know that. And the fact that it passed right overhead, nobody twitched, tells me that it was a known target. It was a known, it may not have been in the air tasking order for the day, the ATO they call it, but someone was aware of it. Because, and I shared a link with Joe from fightersuite.com, and it's a pilot recounting his experience on an aircraft carrier in that same area. And he's sitting inside the alert F-18, ready to be in just a couple of minutes to be launched off that deck to scramble and go up and check out an encroaching, potentially hostile target. But anything that's located spotted on radar, this guy is already ready in there to hit the button, fire up the engines, taxi forward, get into launch configuration, and be fired off the deck. And he says, here comes two Iranian aircraft. They took off from an island not too far away. It was a surprise to them. They don't normally deploy attack aircraft to that island. And those two jets were on that carrier as a potential imminent threat in just a matter of a couple of minutes. And by the time the crew, everybody on the deck watched this happen, as he describes, he took off, literally got the wheels up in the well, and then had to haul back on the stick and turn around and get behind these two jets. That's how far they had encroached. So if they had hostile intent, it was pretty much too late. He could have shot them down, but they could have launched, and he readily admits that. But that's an example of the tenseness of the environment in that area, of the attention that's paid to the safety and security, to safeguarding a national treasure, which is an aircraft carrier, particularly a nuclear aircraft carrier. They take no risk with that, right? So all of that said, this thing flew over us. I don't think it was an unknown, but I can't say that for sure because I don't know.
People are like, oh, Michael Weiss saying everything in our, no, there's no such thing as anomalous craft. He thinks it's all of our technology, which I know from our conversations, you do not believe that. Just so people realize that. Let me just say one thing. Let me just go to one thing that happened this year related to Wilson Davis. So at the SCU conference, the what is SCU? Scientific. What is SCU again? I'm drawing
Scientific
a
Coalition
blank.
for Ufology.
Yeah, so they have their conference. I think it's the second annual conference. And John Alexander, who's been in the intel world over the years, worked on, mostly known for his non-lethal weapon work. He was lecturing. Eric Davis was in the audience, and John Alexander said, John Davies from the UK said, when did you get your copy of Wilson Davis? And I forget if he asked what else he asked him, but anyway, Alexander points to Eric and says, he goes, ask him. He wrote it, kind of with a smile there. So you can a little sarcasm there. And folks who were there were like, Eric Davis looked really uncomfortable. And then afterwards, Davis, Dolan, Tim Taylor, and Alexander were in a group, and they were talking, and Davis was very upset. And people were like, he was upset that Alexander had outed him and put him on the spot. And Alexander denied crash retrievals. And I'm like, without saying what was spoken, I do know that that's not what Eric was mad about. Eric knows Alexander has spoken out publicly against crash retrievals repeatedly. And if they were talking, there's no way Eric would talk about, with people around, he's not going to talk about Wilson Davis. He's not. He's just not. So your takes, all of your takes, why? And this is really something I'm guessing maybe it's his patriotic duty. Why would John Alexander? I know Alexander must know. He must know that there's some sort of crash retrieval program. Why would he be so negative publicly? You think he's just doing the patriotic thing, not trying to give our adversaries information? Speculation? Grant? Chase? Grant first.
I would just be guessing. I mean, he's not read in. I heard the story that he had been briefed by Semivan that this was all for real, and he still didn't believe it. And then he made the comment. He said to Jim Semivan, he said, "So who's running it?" Like the whole idea about who's running the program. And then Semivan looked at him and said, "They are." So I always remember that story. That even when Semivan gave him a briefing, he basically denied it. He just maybe is not read in, and because I know the notes from, and I've seen this lots of times. Like for example, you even get these notes that I got from Oak Shannon. When you take a look, they didn't have any clue what was going on in 85. Everybody thinks, they had all this inside stuff. They had nothing. They were talking just like you and I. They had nothing more. They were trying to put their heads together, and they went through all the subjects. So one page was this subject, cattle mutilations, and all this kind of stuff. And all they had for back engineering was one thing. What's his name? The guy that everybody, Admiral Wilson. No, Admiral. What's the guy that was at SAIC? He was
I don't know, but for people who don't know what you're talking about, that was the John Alexander working group, the Advanced Theoretical Physics. What year did that take place?
85. The notes I have were from 85, but the thing went on longer than that. And it was I have the front cover of the thing, which is top secret restricted, which means it's energy. And that's this controversy that happened with Trump with the documents. I brought this up because Trump said he declassified everything, and there was these rumors that there was nuclear documents. If there was nuclear documents there, Trump did not declassify them. The president has no control over nuclear weapons stuff. That's all atomic energy, and the president cannot declassify that stuff alone. So if that was in his possession, it wasn't declassified. So it was Bobby Ray Inman. That's all they had under crash retrievals was Bobby Ray Inman in big letters across the page. They had nothing in that. And that was all those guys had top secret SCI clearances. And there was 20 guys on there. And I remember when I first got the documents, I put the names out at a conference in Eureka Springs, and I got a message from Hal Putoff. And he said, "Oh, I understand you got a document that has some names of a group that I was supposed to be part of." And I said, "Yeah, I do." And then he said, "Oh, could you send that to me?" And I sent him all the names except for I took Oak Shannon's name off there, and I sent him all the names. I never heard anything more because from time to time I would get stuff, and Hal would contact me. For example, I had all sorts of letters. I had a whole collection of letters to and from people from Art Lundahl, who I say was the first director of the Weird Desk at the CIA. He was the guy that was really into it. He was the guy that channeled the alien in 1959 from the National Photographic Interpretation Center, which is what he ran. He's the guy that briefed the president on the nuclear problem in Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was showing him the launchers and stuff he was an expert on. He had developed this system of taking images and then changing them digitally from satellites so you could get all this detail. And I had all sorts of letters, and Hal contacted me and wanted my collection of Art Lundahl letters because he knew how important this guy was. He was, again, a name that most people don't know, but a major figure in ufology.
I want to address this. Somebody said, does anyone think the Wilson Davis documents are a transcript from a recording? I think it's very likely. In my opinion, I have reason to believe it may have been recorded. I don't know for sure, though. I'm not just guessing, but
it looks like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it does look like it's really, really accurate. Then again, Eric Davis has a memory like, and I'm going to let you guys talk a little bit so I can mute myself. Michael and Chase, tell me if you think this information will ever make it public. I'm going to mute myself. Michael first. Chase first. Chase first.
Yeah, Joe, just to clarify, what information specifically? Because the Wilson documents are obviously already public. So what are we referring to?
Well, is it going to get confirmed? I think he wants to know. When is this finally going to be?
Oh, when can we expect Eric to come forward and say this is legitimate?
And the existence of a crash retrieval program.
So just to speak to that, and I'd like, I certainly am interested to hear what Michael has to say, but with respect to Eric confirming these notes, I can't say. I have no speculation, no guess whatsoever. I think that as more and more people are interested in this, and individuals such as us push and push and push, a little more of the truth will come out. I'm so adamant about my position because of my own personal experiences, and I have to believe that those others in the field, like Grant, Michael, forgive me, I don't know that much about you aside from the triangle experience. These experiences that we have as individuals are really, I think, what really motivates us to kind of dig and push. With respect to just governmental, the government coming out officially and saying that this is legitimate, we have a crash retrieval program, we've been studying this for X number of years. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I don't think it will ever happen. Not in my lifetime, not in my children's lifetimes. And the reason I don't think it'll happen is because human beings as a collective, as a group, are dangerous, and they do dangerous things. We've seen that with COVID. We've seen that with natural disasters. We see that all the time, all over the world. If a government of the world came out and said that this is legitimate, we're interacting with them, they're here, they're under the oceans, whatever the case might be, they're ultra-dimensional, whatever the case is, I don't think people can handle it. I think that individuals can handle it, but I think it would be a very dangerous situation for this country and for other nations around the world. And I think that's the reason why it's not publicly acknowledged. I could be wrong, but that's my position. With respect to, Grant, earlier you were talking about alien abductions, and Joe, you mentioned something about, them having a vehicle that could traverse an infinite amount of, distance instantaneously.
Well, supposedly Will Miller thinks that we have that technology.
We do, but it's not what people think it is. And Grant's familiar with what I'm referring to, and there are other areas in science and in fringe science, if you want to call it that support this. And there's enough anecdotal evidence to support all of these claims that people make fun of. I've been on the side of the fence where, like I said, my background, I have a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. I work in technology. I've worked in technology for over a decade. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm not the dumbest guy either. And I've had some really interesting experiences that I can't explain. And I can't explain them with the physics that is accepted physics now. I can't explain them. I have good friends that I can't talk to these things about because they are very rational and logical, and they haven't had the same experiences. So there are elements to this that that we don't understand, and maybe some of these agencies do. I'm getting away from UFOs and UAPs a bit because I think that it's a mistake to talk about one and not talk about the other. I think it's a mistake to not talk about the alien abduction phenomenon, if you want to call it that, and talk about UAPs that we can explain. We have video evidence of. We have eyewitness accounts by trained observers such as Michael and his brothers and sisters in arms, in serving this country. We have these accounts, but there are so many other strange things out there, and all of this is tied together. And part of this, Grant, you were talking about walking into the UFO, and it's the size of your backyard, and then you get inside of it, and it's the size of a football field. There are so many accounts like that, but they're all subjective. There are characteristics that are the same, but the majority of these accounts are very specific to the individual, and there's a reason for that. So I'm if you guys prod me and poke me, I'll go on, but that's kind of where I am. When Grant and I met, I was adamant about pursuing some kind of position in government or in the private sector in which I could work with the technology, because I knew that, obviously, as all the four of us know, and some of the audience probably is confident in knowing, that there are individuals here on Earth that work with this technology, whether it has to do with the mind, whether it has to do with physical extraterrestrial intelligence, something that's terrestrial that we're not familiar with, whatever the case is. There are individuals out there that do this for a living, aside from Grant's profession, and that's reporting and investigating, right? So I was focused on that. That's why I connected with that 3-star. That's why I had those conversations. That's why I spent almost $100,000 building an expeditionary vehicle, and I was going to spend another $150,000 just on a camera to go on top of that. So, but you get to a point, at least I have gotten to a point in realizing that a lot of this is subjective. You can have experiences whenever you want. You can speak to anything that you want, and that's really difficult to talk about.
Michael, and then Grant, do you think, Michael, in our lifetimes we will learn that there is, allegedly, if there is, that we'll learn as a crash retrieval program? Sorry.
Well, I think I said last time, I felt like sort of quoting Keith Jackson, the late Keith Jackson, the mustard's flown off the hot dog the moment Eric Davis made that claim. But I look at it, I find it highly unlikely that we will be given the details that we all are, I'm fairly confident, are pretty close to, as far as some of our assumptions, as far as nailing down the existence of some programs. But I think coming at it from the inside, the view is, I think it boils down to purely risk management. I agree with Chase, and people can say what they want when I say this, but I think he's right. People will say we can handle the truth. Some individuals can't handle the truth, as far as I understand from what's been put together over the decades, what's been surmised or inferred or flat out taken from the government's own mouth in some of the older documents that have been released through FOIA. So the preponderance of evidence shows that absolutely something is going on, whether we're being visited or they're presenting themselves and they're not visiting, where they're actually cohabitating in some way on this planet, or just adjacent to our particular frequency of existence. out on the spectrum of what we can see and can't see or sense and cannot sense. But I think from the government's perspective, if this is all, if the core story is true, there's certainly enough reporting over the decades to make more than just smoke indicating a fire, right? But it's all anecdotal, and the government would be compelled to number one, not ignore something like this. Absolutely, I agree with that. They have been exceedingly interested in this from the very moment that, certainly after the dawn of flight, when we were supposedly on the leading edge of this stuff, these technologies, manned flight, and we're seeing things in the sky that completely outperform any concepts that we have as far as how they might operate. The government would be looking at the risk of, number one, there's the state of the art, the technical state of the art. And I know for a fact that the government, our government, other peer nations in the world, most first-rate countries are striving to stay ahead of the technological state of the art in various categories of technology and advancements that are made, whether it's medical or military or what have you. If you have a capability that's derived either from observing these craft over the decades or from having physical access to the material because of a crash or a recovery, an unearthing archaeologically, or however you acquired these vehicles, if you have this technology and you have derived state-of-the-art advancements that are beyond the current state, you know, it's like I said to you, Joe, you wouldn't use a sledgehammer to drive a 10-penny nail, right? So right now, our advancements in naval aviation, in fighter aircraft, for example, or bombers, is meant to match and exceed the capabilities of our adversaries to a point. In engineering, it's referred to as gold plating. You can't, and you should not, and they don't typically design the perfect widget because it's cost prohibitive, it's time consuming, and there's so much risk involved. And do you really need it at the end of the day? Do you need I'm just going to throw it out there, a so-called TR-3B to dominate an adversary's air force over the Taiwan Straits when a few F-18s and F-15s and some other technologies can probably get the job done? So unless our national backs are against the wall from a national security standpoint, where national survival is at stake, I don't see, even if we have such a technology, it being unveiled at some rollout like the not too distant future. We'll see the B-21 rolled out, the new stealth bomber. That is an advancement in the current state of the art, but it's been looked at undoubtedly since the B-1 program wrapped up. They started theorizing on how they could improve that, right? So the other thing is,
just quick, because I do want to get the grant on this.
Yeah, the last thing is the societal impacts, right? If the core story is true, if they know much more what is tossed around out there about the core story, about who we are with respect to the others and so on and so forth, you're talking about destroying people's fundamental belief structures. And that would it cause a massive stock market crash and the world to stop spinning tomorrow? Who knows what the impacts would be, but it would not be insignificant from a societal standpoint.
Right.
So there's a lot, and I imagine there are intense meetings that have gone on, probably still going on, about these hearings, about the investigation into this topic on Capitol Hill, and I would be surprised if there weren't intense negotiations between the powers that are in charge of these programs, if they exist, and they apparently do, and those that are seeking answers, to let them know that, hey, this is a hot potato, and we have to be very, very careful.
Chase,
So-
you had real quick, Chase, and I want to definitely get the grant.
Real quick, just to add on to what Michael said, the other question to ask yourself, and Michael, you're obviously more familiar than the rest of the group with this, is we see what psychological operations is capable of within USG and other governments around the world. If the audience isn't, they can certainly Google that and get some examples of some psychological operations. And this is a core part of the overall system. So you have to ask yourself, if all of this is contained within USG or privatized somewhere, it is the most compartmentalized, secured, protected thing ever. It has to be. And so you have to ask yourself the question, are we really looking at what we think we're looking at? Do we really have all the information and the right intelligence aside from, our own personal experiences and what we think is right based on those and the other work that we all have done? It's interesting to think about, because military agencies are really good at carrot on a stick kind of a thing. I mean, that's part of the operation in getting the bad guy, isn't it? So if they're protecting Fort Knox here, if you will, they're going to be protecting it really, really well. So I don't know. You could make the argument maybe there are conversations going on, and maybe they're concerned about the things that are making the news. But on the other hand, they might be the ones that are putting those things on the news and making those conversations happen so that we're focused on one thing and not focused on the other. And this is where the other side of the argument comes up, and those that haven't had these personal experiences that say, well, yeah, this is an operation to take your mind off of one thing and make you think that fairies are real or whatever. And in reality, it's the new TR-3B. Of course, I don't agree with that, but that's an argument that comes up. But it is a good argument that if we think that we're really close to uncovering the truth, we're up against at least a $775 billion budget in 2022 or 715, and that's just the part of the budget that's been publicized. And individuals that do put carrots on sticks for a living. So it's something to think about.
So
yeah, I think there's a certain aspect of as well from a counterintelligence perspective of some phishing, right? There's information that would be out there to generate a response from our adversaries, to try to fish and find out where they are on this topic, or any topic, right? Any technological advancement topic. You're going to be trying to do things to stir the pot to get the other side to commit some error in giving out facts about what their programs might involve. So there's probably, the truth is usually, I say this a lot, is somewhere in the middle. There are too many reports over the decades for this not to be something. There's too much. There are too many actual memos that, the book I refer to a lot, UFOs in Government, a historical perspective, is comprised entirely of writing from the horse's mouth, right? What has the government said about this over the decades? And it clearly points to that there is something, they are deeply interested in this topic. What we're talking about are the advancements and the core knowledge that they have, where the advancements made from exploiting the technology or exploiting the observations. And we know from Paul Hill's book, from NASA Langley's research, that they knew a hell of a lot that still are things that are still being referred to today as breaking how physics works, when Paul Hill and his team said clearly that these things, from their maneuvering standpoint, they don't break physics as we know it. They bank to turn, they pitch back to stop, they tilt forward to go forward. When their luminosity, their brightness is a product of the power level of the power source on board, and they cause effects, radiation or otherwise, on humans, animals, living things, burn marks on the ground, and so forth. They knew all of this, according to Paul Hill, who wasn't allowed to publish his book, and so it was done posthumously by his daughter after his death. He wasn't allowed to do that, to publish that book the results of his work while he worked for NASA by his management. He was disallowed from doing so. That's a fascinating book. And so people, I always say, well, why are we kicking this can again, right? The government's known for decades. So this is all, they're acting, I say acting, the UAP Task Force report, they went back to 2004, it's as far as back as they reportedly went back. Well, that's complete bullshit in my estimation, right? We have virtual proof that they've been studying this for a very, very long time and no more than beyond 2004. The fact that
right.
they put a cutoff date in there is laughable, but so it's almost like if SAP programs are reviewed the way we know that they're reviewed, and by experience, these latest documents on how those programs work and how the oversight works is accurate. And one of the main functions of the senior review group and the SAPOC is to try to avoid wasting money on redundant programs. That's why you report your program. They then go off and survey the community to find out if there's another similar program running somewhere else, so that we're not pumping billions into two separate funding streams doing virtually the same thing. And that may or may not be why Senator Harry Reid was denied the application for his programs to be turned into a SAP. It's because somebody had the insight to understand and the knowledge to understand that, well, this has been going on for decades over here, so we don't want to make another one over here, right? So, but again, I don't know that. I'm just telling you what my opinion is.
No, I definitely, reinventing the wheel, but probably I think we've already done it. Grant, give me something. Give me some hope, Grant. Base and Michael, we're not going to see any proof of a crash retrieval program in our lifetimes. What do you think?
Well, what I would say is I was in this since 1975, and I remember I was at an X conference, and Steve Bassett had all the speakers on the stage at the very end for a panel, and he said, "When do you think disclosures is going to take place?" This was at least 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and it went down the thing, 6 months, a year, and it came to me, and I said, 2041. You should have seen Steve Bassett's face. It's like, how could you say that in front of all these people? I never, ever believed we'd get disclosure on UFOs. I never believed the government would admit that they had a program, that UFOs were real. And then they did, because I wrote an article called 64 Reasons They've Decided Not to Tell You the Truth. And some of the reasons were brought up just in the last couple of minutes. It was Steve Bassett Steve Greer used to say, the stock market's going to melt down. People are going to realize oil isn't worth anything. People are going to commit suicide. And when the New York Times article came out, what happened? Absolutely nothing. It was just like nothing had happened. Everybody just went on with their life. And I think the same thing would happen if they confirmed there was crash saucers, because most people really don't. It's an interesting thing. It's like everybody sort of believes it already and say, okay, I believe that. Like, okay, now tell me where they're from. And so I would not be surprised if it happens tomorrow. On the other hand, I know the whole idea behind lead time in weapons, that the highest classified secrets are weapon secrets. And this would be as it was the Canadian government wrote in 1950, this is the most highly classified secret in the United States. And I believe it is, because it's the idea that if you can use it for a weapon one day before your enemy gets the weapon, you win the war. It's like the atomic bomb. You get the atomic bomb and Japan's working on it and they're 1 week behind. It's game over because you've already used it, and you can't go, or you've got a 7-year lead time. And that was the whole thing, is how much is the lead time? But I would say that this could break almost instantaneously. You've even had situations where if you're talking to Lue Elizondo, you don't ask them, do they have a cross saucer program? You say, as Tucker Carlson said, do you believe it's possible there's a cross saucer program? And Lue Elizondo said, yeah, I believe that's possible. You get this thing where Lue is right on the edge. These people are right on the edge of saying, yes, this thing's for real. And I would say, and I've heard that they're working on right now, is the immunity program, that the people that are going to come in the next hearing have immunity. If that happens, it's game over. Because I say it's game over if Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis go up there And even in the chat, there was a mention that George Knapp has a whole series of people that have talked to him that are willing to go public to confirm there's a cross-saucer program. I remember I wrote about the Bob Lazar case because we were there when this was happening. We wrote about it in 1990 when the story was breaking. And I talked to George Knapp about his witnesses. Most people don't realize George Knapp had not one, he had 25 witnesses that backed up the Lazar story. And he talked about the 6 witnesses that were going to go on camera, and they got threatened one after another. And George was very upset, not so much that these people didn't go on camera, but the fact that his phone had been tapped. And he talked about the woman who was the steno when they moved the stuff from Wright-Patterson to Area 51, and she took the notes of the meetings of all the stuff being transferred there, stuff like that these people are willing to go forward. All it takes is one guy like Eric Davis to say, yes, we have a cross-saucer program, or the story that I heard, maybe from Eric Davis, maybe from someone back in those days, was that there was a general who had gone into the thing and he'd put his hand on the side of the craft and the craft was alive. These sort of things. If you get one of those stories that comes forward, and that's what's happened with, I think it's almost inevitable, because you hear like Jim Semivan went and he said to the government, he tells this story. I went to the government, the highest level people in all the 3-letter agencies, and I said, you guys had a chance to get this out. You didn't get it out. We're going to drop it. And it was the idea that all these retired people like Elizondo and Putoff and Justice and all these guys, we're going to drop this thing. We're going to go ahead. You guys had your chance. You could never get this story out. And he said the response was, oh, okay, go ahead with it and keep us informed as what's going on. So they're basically moving it, I think, from the black world to the white world, because I think the problem in the crash retrieval problem in the black world has been described by all the people who talk about it in these last couple of years, is this stovepiping thing, that they can't figure it out because they have no access to what anybody else is doing. So these guys have the electrical stuff, these guys have the metal stuff, nobody's talking with each other. And if you can get it into the white world where you have this cosmic club or invisible college or whatever it is, these guys that want to work on this thing, and you get hundreds of people working on it, that will help the black world solve the problem. And it's always going to be the fact that they need this thing. And I don't think the black world has it. I think they have that stovepiping problem that people talk about, that they're not getting anywhere because it's so compartmentalized that the whole investigation is broken down. So I believe they have the cross-saucer material. I believe all this kind of stuff, but I still go with the fact that they still can't figure out a lot. They've got some stuff, like, for example, nitinol, the idea that they had the metal when they first discovered it, the memory metal, that you got these spin-offs. So you see a few small items, but nothing major. I always say, if they had the technology, I heard back in 75, they had the technology. And I said, well, if they had the technology, I think they should have done a bit better in the Vietnam War. They were just launching rockets, and every plane that comes out, advanced plane, is still just a plane. There's nothing that really symbolizes that they've actually cracked this thing. And I think as Jim Semivan said, when you take a look at it, there doesn't even appear to be a there. This has got something to do with consciousness and multi dimensions, that there's really nothing there to look at. It's that advanced. It's that far down the road. And that's why I think they're trying to move it into the white world to get help from scientists. As Gary Nolan says, it may be anecdotal, but even UFO sightings are anecdotal. It's all the same thing. And Gary Nolan says, you look at the 5% of the stuff that's outside the curve, the bell curve. That's what you look at, because that's the anomaly. That's what's going to tell you where the new technology is, and you work on that. So I think there's a lot of people working on it. And I think I would not be surprised if there's a confirmation even in a couple of days. All it takes is one guy who's got immunity, who stands up. As I said, the Wilson Leak document has already been read into the congressional investigation on this subject. It's public in the government now. And so there's going to be questions asked about it. And they're evidently going to bring in Hal Putoff, and they're going to bring in Eric Davis. They're going to give him immunity, and it's game over.
Yeah, and I think that the new UFO office, Arrow, they will learn a lot of interesting things. The question for us is, are we going to get to learn that? Which, that's the big question. And I'm skeptical that we're going to learn anything right now. I hope so. But let me since you brought up consciousness, because there are people in the chat that think, these guys are just nuts and bolts. What about consciousness? I am really interested in consciousness. When I first started getting into this, that's all I was reading about. And I know everybody on the panel is interested. So the question for the panel, an educated speculation, is the phenomena we're witnessing different forms of intelligence, interdimensional, extraterrestrial? I'm not sure what CT is, but ultra terrestrial. There's so many, time traveling, and which famous cases fall within which form of intelligence. I will just go quickly. I think most of what we're dealing with is something that's native to this planet, and it's not something physical. It's something that can take physical form. And reading John Keel and Valet, that's kind of where I get some of my ideas from. So I think the majority of it is that. But yeah, there may be ETs here too. I don't know. Time travel is maybe. And let me just go clockwise. I'll start with you, Chase. Your opinion on that.
Oh, hell, you're going to put me on the spot here, huh, Joe?
And consciousness, anything is fine. Just an opinion.
Yeah, I'll make it short. Look, like I said before in the show, for the rest of the audience, I came from a position in which I thought I was very rational and logical. And if I had run into someone on the street 6 years ago that was talking about ultra dimensionality as some kind of entity, contact event, or communicating with other intelligent life aside from physical life, because I did have my own experiences at a young age with what I perceived to be physical craft, I would have thought that person was crazy. That's not the position that I have now today. And my entire position on my existence has completely changed as well because of my experiences and where my research has led me. And Grant has been with me for a good part of that. A friend of mine anyway, and confidant. So to answer the audience question real quickly, my opinion is that it's all of the above. I'm not going to speculate as to what historical accounts were representative of interdimensional, extradimensional, ultradimensional, or extraterrestrial types. We could make an exercise of that, but I don't really understand the value in that exercise. With all due respect, I think that my answer at this point in my life is that it's all consciousness, baby. That's what it is. It's all about perception, and I refer to each individual as a perceptual dimension, and it's all subjective. And I've had experiences that are textbook alien abduction experiences that were not physical, that were absolutely real. There was absolute communication and telepathy. I certainly was not in my home any longer, and I was looking to have that kind of experience. And I've had experiences where lights have appeared in the sky, very similar to the CE5 term coined by Greer, but this concept of human-initiated contact event, going out and having an event. I was doing research on non-localized consciousness, and there's some really compelling evidence in neurophysiology, neuroscience today. For anyone interested in the audience, I would suggest looking up orchestrated objective reductionism. There's a really interesting paper there by a Nobel laureate, and there's some really interesting neurophysiological evidence out of Johns Hopkins on our brains intersecting with a quantum vibratory field. I'll leave it at that. You could do an entire show on just that, and many shows on just that. But I think the experiences that we have are more than just random. This concept of coincidence is not what modern science believes thinks it is. There's a lot of things that we have gotten wrong, and there's a lot of things that we've gotten right. But we're infants in more ways than one, and a lot of this conversation around many of these details is noise. You don't need to go looking for it. You can go outside, turn the lights off, close your eyes, you find it. I know I sound like a hippie on the mountain with love beads and my pants off, but there's a lot of truth in that. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted,
Joe,
Joe.
you're muted.
You're muted.
I understand that, tape, because I do have an interest in that, and publicly you would see. Although if you see me on Twitter, you see I do talk a lot about consciousness related stuff, which I don't know if we'll get to today with Bankston and the work, which I know Grant knows about. I know Chase knows about. It's my favorite subject. But we'll get to that. Michael, your take, and then we'll get to Grant as far as what we're dealing with. What's your opinion on what we might be dealing with?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think if you look at Putoff's recent paper, I wonder very seriously how much of that is almost a form of disclosure or breadcrumb dropping on the part of Putoff, putting out there the leading hypotheses. There are indications that there's a tremendous consciousness aspect. There are indications that these are extraterrestrial. There are indications that this is ultra-terrestrial, and there's a very strong indication, based on some very good evidence that's out there, that there's a nuts and bolts. There's a material aspect to this as well. I mean, there are soil compression tests that have been done based on sightings. Just to throw one out there, Valet talks about this in France. It was I forget what year it was, but it Transin Province. I can't remember how to say that in French, but this thing landed on some railroad tracks, and they did compression tests on the cross ties, and they discovered that this thing weighed on the order of 30-something thousand pounds. So that's about 15 tons. And then again, going back to NASA Langley's research in Paul Hill's book, he described these from a nuts and bolts perspective of having the density, having mass or density approaching that of a submarine, more so than an aircraft, for example, which would be lighter, weight conserving, yet powerful. These things had a density, had a mass to them. And there were several, and he shows the math, he shows the evidence, and he shows why he comes to these conclusions. So there's a little bit of each, a little bit of something in there for everyone, so to speak. And I believe those are all valid approaches that Putoff writes about. I just wonder, again, whether he's sort of pointing research in sort of preferred directions based on what might already be known. I wonder if that's enough, or is he purely just scatterbraining and throwing this stuff out there. I find that, given the way Putoff is a very forward-leaning person, as far as everything he says is purposeful. Everything he says is very well thought out. So you have to, when I apply that to this, I don't know what's up with the mute button here, but when I apply that to his latest paper, it makes me wonder how much of that is pushing the community in very discrete directions, because he's advocating that you pick a path and you go down it, right? You come to a fork in the road, take a fork, research it, drive it to conclusions. If the conclusions are negative, you're done, go down the next fork, go down the next path. And he's indicating there's a little something there in all of those aspects.
Grant?
I'm with Chase. I believe it's all consciousness, and I think you got to go back to the original guys in quantum physics, whether it's Bohm or Planck or Heisenberg or Schrodinger. All these guys said consciousness is primary. That's what we got to get. We got to get that right, and then the rest all figures out. But we keep thinking that matter creates consciousness. It's the other way around. Consciousness is primary. As they said, these quantum physics guys, nothing gets behind consciousness. It is primary. So what I would say, if in the end, it's all going to be different vibration. They're in a consciousness vibration that's different than us. You just change the dial. You'll hear experiencers talk about being around beings and they're vibrating. They can't be very near the beings. The beings can't stay here very long because this vibration thing. I think it's like Deepak Chopra says, everything's an action, everything is an activity inside consciousness. When you break it down, the example I always give is if you have a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, and you float above your body and you look back at your body, you see that your body is still there and your body is now inside your awareness. It's inside your consciousness. You can look at the brain. You say, is consciousness creating, is brain creating consciousness? No, the consciousness is floating in the room. The consciousness is here and the brain is over there. So it's the other way around. And then that consciousness can go and look out the window and see the stars and the planets. And that is inside the consciousness. It's this idea that Steve Greer, there's a lot of different examples I can use, but Steve Greer always quotes this thing. You see yourself as a puny form when within you, the universe is enfolded. That's the thing that I think may flip, is if there's no time and space, if those are creations, how big is the universe? I remember I was interviewing, there's two women in England who had these, they call them the beings, that they had contact with these beings. And I was talking to both of them and they independently, and they would tell me stuff. And then they said, oh, the beings want to have a talk with you. So I went to interview these beings and they sort of appear, only the one woman can see them. They're like black. They don't have faces. They don't have anything. They're just sort of black forms, little tiny guys that run around. They're maybe 1 foot tall or whatever. And there's two of them. And so I said to them, I said, are you extraterrestrial? And they said, oh, do you want us to be extraterrestrial? We can be extraterrestrial if you want. We can take you to our planet if you want. But no, we're not extraterrestrial. We've always been here. And you hear this over and over again, the idea that everything is here, everything is now. There is no time, there's no space. Everything's here and now. It's all like pages on top of a book. And that may be the idea, is that you're going within yourself. If you talk to out-of-body experience people, they're going within themselves. Chase talked about this experience. He was working on this field. We won't get into it, but he was working in the field. So was I. And he had this experience where time was totally altered, where he was in this abduction experience. I remember talking to him. I said, you had an abduction experience? And he said, yeah. And I said, was it real? And there's no way that it was an alien that came to his bedroom and took him out. He was lying on a couch for 10 minutes and all this happened, the time, the space, everything twisted. And that's what we got to realize. We're in 1492. We're believing the world's flat, the sun goes around the earth. There's a pile of stuff with our naive realism. We think this is happening, this is happening. And things like these experiences that Chase had, that I've had, tell you, you got something wrong here. This would not be happening if the world was the way it's being described. And that's the anomaly. That's what Gary Nolan says. You go after the 5% that doesn't make any sense, because that's where the Nobel Prizes are. That's where the discoveries are going to be. And I believe this, when you break it all down, this is all going to be consciousness. And that was the sort of the vision I had in 2012, watching that lecture where it sort of came into my head. I had this download experience where I've been spending my whole life looking at UFOs and I couldn't figure it out. And they said, it's consciousness. It's all consciousness. And it came with absolute certainty. And I just shifted my whole field and started going down consciousness. And I can say that the experience that Chase had was one of the ones where I said, are you sure it was an abduction experience? And he said, yeah. And that sort of clarified that whole thing. Abduction experience may not be what people think it is. Good, Chase.
I just to add to that too, you know, when I reached out to Grant, when Grant and I first became acquainted, I had a CE5 experience, and you know, I was in my kitchen. I was going over all of I was reaching out to other experiencers that had experienced triangle events similar to my own, and prior to that, I was having, you know, discussions and looking through research on, as I said, this idea that our minds, our physiology somehow interface with the quantum vibratory field. So this concept of non-locality, of non-local consciousness. I was in my kitchen. I was thinking about the day and all of this and how it tied together, and something changed. I had an epiphany. I won't go into that epiphany, but I was compelled to go outside. And I was still operating completely autonomously in myself. I walk outside, but I feel better physiologically than I've ever, and mentally as I've ever felt in my life. Still to this day, that was the most exceptional moment in my life. I walked outside and I had a question in my mind, and these lights appeared one by one in response to this question. And as an engineer, thinking statistically, thinking, I obviously I believe I have very good judgment when it comes to working out if something is a plane or a drone, or if it's the underside of a bird that's illuminated from ground radiation or whatever, right? And this wasn't any of that. But I asked the question again, and another light appeared. And I asked the question again, and another light appeared. And my wife at the time came outside. She asked me what I was doing outside. This was about 8 p.m. Central Standard. It doesn't matter. 8 p.m. She comes outside and she said, "What are you doing?" I say, "I think I'm calling in UFOs." And she said, "You're effing crazy. Show me." And I did it again, and 2 of them appeared next to each other. They spun around in the sky, flew off in opposite directions. She lost her mind, called her friend. She's screaming and shaking and sits me down and says, "I know it's real. I don't want to see it. I don't want to talk about it." And I've told Grant this story before, but the only reason I mention it now is because that event proved to me, I pulled one primary thing out of that event. One of 2 things occurred in my mind. Either this was extraterrestrial and they have technology that interfaces with not just my own thoughts, but it seems like everyone's thoughts. And for some reason I was singled out, which seems very unlikely. Or thoughts are non-local, and whatever that was not extraterrestrial. It was something entirely different, something that it doesn't seem like many people are really talking about, at least not the people in the circles that I was in then. So I'm with Grant. This is all, everything, this experience, everything is the paranormal supernatural experience. What we're having right now is the main event. And I don't think I know from my own experiences that it's one of an infinite number of events, of experiences. Consciousnness is doesn't seem to end. I'm with you, Grant. I needed to add that because that was the moment in time that I shifted as well from kind of nuts and bolts to thinking about how can I categorize cattle mutilations and where can I go to get more information on animal mutilations, and that was where I was focused to what we're doing now. So that's where I'm at.
I really want to get I want to talk about, if you guys have time, I want to talk about the work of Bill Bankston. If we want to talk about consciousness, because I've been speaking about it. I first learned about his work. I was working on a show in Houston, and our production assistant, she's like, "Have you ever heard of Bill Bankston?" And he was on Fireside Chats. I'm like, "I don't know who it is." She's like, "Really good evidence about healing." I'm like, "Oh, healing. There's no evidence that I've seen that I thought was credible for healing." She gives me the interview. I listen. I'm like, this sounds really, really impressive. Anyway, I wound up taking his class. Grant took his class. You know about him. Most of the people in UFO Twitter have no interest in it. They think it's nonsense. Meanwhile, he's done study after study after study. Grant, tell people who William Bankston is and what kind of research he engages in.
Okay, well, and I want to tell an interesting story that ties into UFOs. But Bankston was a guy who was he was doing a degree in sociology, I think a PhD, and he ran into this guy by the name of he's
What's
a psychic guy,
Benjamin Merrick.
Merrick. So Merrick was at swimming pool, and Bankston was a lifeguard. And he ran into this guy, and the guy was able to do psychic stuff, make clouds disappear, stuff like that. And he sort of got friendly with this guy, and the guy was doing healing and stuff. And then he healed Bankston's back, and Bankston asked him, "Well, how do you do this?" And he would describe this process. The way I describe the process is, what you do is you take ego images. So you take things, it can't be like when Bankston did the course, everybody wants to talk about, we want to save the world, we want to create a cure for cancer and stuff. He said, no, you can't put that stuff in there. It's got to be ego. It's got to be selfish stuff. And so you have a new motorhome and we're going on a trip and all this kind of stuff. And basically, yeah, the banana. You tell the banana story. Anyway,
we'll get to the banana in a second.
Banana story. That's a good one because we tested it out and both of us found it worked. But anyway, so the interesting thing was that you get these ego images and then you memorize them, and then he has this process to go faster and faster, and you flip these images in your head. You just go from one to another, and there are all these ego images, and he can teach you to do them 1,000 at a time. You put them on a clock, you 20 of them on a clock, and then you spin the clock and all this kind of stuff. So I sort of had learned to do this, and I remember when I went in there, I was interested in the whole thing because of the whole thing about what's called rapid image cycling. That's what I call it. And so when he got this process, that's what Bankston told him, is you do this rapid image cycling. So Bankston did it, and he would heal all these rats. And then even if he was in the same building, the rats would get cured. And it was just bizarre how they would, have like 100% cure rate. And they claim that they're the only ones that can actually cure cancer as long as you haven't had radiation or chemotherapy. But it was the rapid image cycling that interested me. And if you go to the story, so you're getting these images, you're flashing these images really, really fast, like 1,000 or 2,000 a second in your head. And what happens is you get the healer out of the way. That's what his idea was. You take the ego, same as you do hypnosis, you quiet the mind, but you're not quieting the mind. You're getting the ego, the left brain, to shut down and go for coffee. So we can, and so once you get the healer out of the way with this rapid image cycling, the channel opens and the heat comes out your left hand. So your left hand is run by your right brain. The right brain is the female brain. It's the left brain is the ego. So you shut down the left brain, the right brain, the heat comes to the left hand. I remember when I was in the training session and the heat was coming out of my hand, I could not believe it. I was like, holy shit, this actually works. And it was just bizarre. But the rapid image cycling, if you take a look in the UFO field, what you see is the aliens use exactly the same thing. If you look at the story of the kids at Ariel School, there was a number of them. Emily Trim was one where she was there. They were on the logs. They're running along the logs on the side, and this girl's beside her. And the being is standing there with the eyes, and the stuff is coming out of the eyes. And she described the images moving extremely fast. And she was getting technological images, almost like Bankston. These images were going in her head, and the emotion was there. And the last one was this big flash. And she said, that doesn't mean the world's going to be destroyed. So she's getting these technological images. And the message was, you've got technology, but you can do better. The girl that was right beside her was getting the same images, flash, 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 and they were flashing. And the girl got ecology images about where you're destroying the world. You got to save the trees, all this kind of stuff. And then if you look at Susie Hansen says there was 200 of them. I think it was 2010. Were taken to a theater type environment, like an underground theater, and they were sitting in these things, and the alien came out, and then the thing started. There's an image flashed on the screen, and she said, then another image, and you were these ecological images, and another one, and she said, and after a while they were going over 100 a minute, and she said they had trained us how to do it. And she said there was people crying, and these images were flashing 100 at a time on the screen, and all the emotion. And the alien just came out and he waved his hand like this, and everybody quietened down. The whole thing was over. So she talked about this imaging, like that's how they move tremendous amount of information into your head and make it stick as this rapid image. So that's what Bankston was doing. So when I went to the top healer in Chicago, and I said, do you know that this is in ufology, that this happens? People report this in ufology. I said, has Bankston ever had an experience? She said, oh yeah. She said, and then I went and looked at his book. If you look at the book that he wrote, you'll see at the very end, he said, oh, Bennett Merrick was having a rough time. You know what? He actually believed you were some Alpha Centauri, and he had come to bring this healing to the world. And I was his partner into this whole thing. And Bankston didn't believe it. But when the healer said, oh, you didn't know Bankston's a big experiencer? He's had a major experience. And it was the whole thing. It's like it all tied into ufology. I said, wow. I mean, it's like all the pieces just sort of came together. It was just fascinating. But it's a unique type of healing. I've used it a couple of times. The problem is that when you learn it, then who do you heal? Like it's kind of hard to, unless you set up a practice, but it's quite the thing. And Bankston is a PhD sociologist. he works on this, but he's a very trained guy in the sciences.
Yeah, and people who are listening to this, I know a lot of people are saying, what the heck are they talking about? And I don't know, but the alien stuff, I had never heard the rapid imaging stories related to aerial school. Right now, the theory is the aerial school students saw puppets. That is a theory, which is ridiculous. Whatever they saw, they didn't see a puppet show. But Chase, and I'm sorry, Michael, I know this is not your wheelhouse as far as Bankston, but Chase, just talk about some of the data that Bankston has collected, because he has done serious research and he is healing mice using this technique. I don't care what people think about the technique. I don't care what people think about anything. The data is the data. Just talk about your knowledge of some of his data and some of the experiments he's done with schools, with universities.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't actually looked at the documentation in a while because I've gotten tired of trying to argue, or not argue, but defend my position. And forgive the background noise. We have a wiener hound that's excited. He's the squeaky toys. He's chasing him around the house. So Bankston is he healed entire populations of laboratory mice. 7 triple-blind studies, if I'm not mistaken. And the banana, right? There's another thing. You guys can look this up on YouTube. William Bankston or Bill Bankston. He has a presentation where he talks about changing the outcome of degradation or rotting. Right. This banana. I think Grant's. How old is yours now, Grant? Is this
probably be about 6 years old, I guess.
6 years. I'm at 3, I think. So,
yeah.
And I laugh when I see myself on camera holding this up because I look like a crazy person. but that's the fun of it, right? This is it's not rotting. This is petrified. And I don't know if you guys can hear that, but again, this crazy guy hitting banana on the table. But if you do this, it's really simple experiment. You can go and you hold one banana with no intentions, another banana with the intention that you holding it will not change the outcome of the degradation of the banana, and then you have a control banana that you don't touch. And what you find is the banana that you hold with no intention petrifies itself. It's really curious. So this is in line with his discussion about using rapid image cycling in the lab. He would go out, he would get undergraduate students, very skeptical undergraduate students that didn't think that by holding a cage of mice, they could influence the outcome of the cancer one way or the other. And this is all done by the book the same way that med students and cancer labs across the country and across the world test the effectiveness of medications on fatal cancer.
And
right.
for most people, and for most of his studies, just so people know, they inject these mice with mammary cancer. With cancer, they get mammary cancer, and then these mice will not live past 27 days. There's been like a few thousand experiments in the past, mainstream experiments where they're just giving them drugs, other ways trying to heal the mice. They will die within 27 days if you just leave them alone. Bankston adds one different variable, and it's the healing technique, and they live their full lifespan, most of them 2 years.
Yeah. Completely cure everything, including the progeny of those that were initially injected. And he can't re-inject the populace that was initially injected, nor can he inject the progeny. It has no effect whatsoever. So it's very effective. And again, if my memory serves me correctly, it was 7 triple-blind studies. In every single one of those, 100% of the population was completely cured of terminal cancer, and their progeny had terminal cancer had no effect when injected into the progeny. So it's really compelling research. Now, I would also, a couple of things I want to mention before you guys kind of call it a show. I would recommend anyone that hasn't read, and I'm not paid by Sean Webb, but if you haven't read Mind Hacking Happiness, definitely check out Volume 2. He talks about having his own experience, and he pulls in a lot of the stuff we're talking about. Bankston's work, some of the other physiological and neuroscientific work that's out there, and a lot of the historical, esoteric stuff There's a really interesting YouTube channel that's Museum of Tarot. Again, I'm not affiliated, but and give the name. It's just a name. Just go check it out. Very informed. He talks about these processes. I see in the comments people are talking about Egyptian and the rebirth and ego death and all these things that we haven't really touched on. All of these things, to someone looking through from the outside, that hasn't really spent the time because they think a lot of this is nonsense, please give it a chance. Because the things that we're talking about, the things that we're intrigued by, even the UAP, especially the UAP, these are not new things. These things have happened for thousands of years. They're all throughout recorded history. The language is a barrier to finding these. When you get a few hundred years back, or for that matter, even 200 years back, it becomes quite challenging, but it can be done. And there are people that have done it, that have done that. So I would mention that as well. But yeah, Bankston's work is really compelling. That's the reason I'm not on Strange Recon anymore, is because Jeff was contacted by a caller that had a child die from cancer, and she was offended that I mentioned it on the show, and I mentioned it the same way I mentioned it here.
Yeah.
I didn't say go do rapid image cycling to cure your cancer, and I wouldn't tell anybody that. But you can't argue with 7 triple-blind studies that cure the entire population. You can't. That's better than the placebo effect, and the placebo effect is so outstandingly effective that it's been removed from testing protocol because it's not as effective as the drugs they're testing it against. Which
I don't know
is
if
another
you've seen,
point.
Bankston talks about the placebo effect. He does not think it's psychological. He thinks it's some sort of resonant bonding between the control group and the group that's getting the actual drugs. He says it's the dirtiest secret in those drug studies. He says when you increase the amount of drugs, the actual group that's getting the drug, if they double the dosage, the control group that's getting the placebo, their effect doubles. That shouldn't happen.
That's
That should not
really
happen.
Intriguing. Yeah, no, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that. Yeah.
I haven't seen it. I've heard him talk about it. People need to. I linked to one of my favorite interviews with him in the comments, not in the comments, in the notes. And then he said that he's also working with Dean Rating. They're trying to record it so they can, if they can successfully record it, and it helps heal whatever, they can play it back. They can release it free on the cloud. That's his goal so far. A little success, not even close to being full success. It's interesting. There's a control group of mice in another part of the university. He says more times than not, the students will discover those mice. They'll just look at the mice. They get healed. It seems like there's some sort of connection. Can't explain it. He's not somebody that says this is energy healing. He goes, I don't know what's causing it. Maybe information's somehow it's connected to information, but they're getting healed. We don't have to know the process of how it works to be interested in it. That's just like people, the psychic abilities, whatever, it's the same thing. We don't know how it works, but it works. People have information via sixth sense. And Michael, any thoughts? I know you're not really too familiar with Bankston, but you will be.
I'm a willing participant here. I have an open mind to all this. I think that there is something there in the information, in the data. My background is more hardware, software related, empirical, touchy feely, things you can touch, things you can command and control and use to get insights from data. So I'm open to learning more about all of this. Absolutely.
Yeah. All about data with him. People should check him out. He's a sociologist and also a statistician. And I will have it. Hopefully he's still doing interviews. He hasn't done one in a while. He was the head, I think the president of the SSC, Society for Scientific Exploration. I spoke to 2 big names in the UFO field, very big names. I'm like, what do you think of Bankston? They're like, it's really important work. That's fascinating. It needs to be replicated. And we need to get to the bottom of that. And then John Alexander has a chapter in his latest book. I forget the name of it, something realities, where he goes into all of these alternative ideas. He talks about Bankston too. So yeah, it's something people need to check out.
And
For me,
it
it's one.
ties into the whole idea of healing is not, you can do it like with Bankston, you can be anywhere in the world. You don't have to be there. And you get that in UFO experiencers, that half of them, when they come back, claim they can heal. And you get the parallels with near-death experience people, that I think their figure is 70% claim they can heal other people after they've had the experience. And I've been around Chris Bledsoe. I was there when he healed a woman in Maine. And I saw a photograph of Barack Obama and a kid, which I assume he healed that kid. I mean, he's got healings all the time. And that's what you see. You see this connection to the UFO field and the crossovers with out-of-body experiences and psychedelics and near-death experiences. And you start to look and you start to say, this all may be the same thing. It's because you get these parallels. Like for example, in out-of-body experience, you get the idea that people can see in 360 degrees. And then you get people a UFO experience and they're inside the ship and they say, as soon as I put my hand on the panel, I can see 360 degrees. And I say, can you explain that? Because I'd never heard of that before in my life until somebody mentioned it. And you see it in out-of-body experience and you see it in UFO experiences. And you start to wonder, is this the same thing?
We haven't even touched on hallucinogens. I know you've written about it. You've spoken about it. I mean, I have an interest in all of that. I've never done it. But
the parallels between the near-death experience events, hallucinogenic events, that's why this is a mistake. It's a mistake to separate one from the other. Right. It really is, because there are too many parallels there. There are too many similarities. The 360, the near-death experience, having a life review experience, I've had that twice. Yeah. Anything that I could possibly say, even if I was very well spoken, which I don't believe I am, but if I was, I still wouldn't be able to explain that in a way that did it any justice whatsoever. The same thing's true for the alien abduction event. I couldn't begin to really explain that. I can tell you I was on a table and I saw some entities, and that's Carly, guys. Carly, say hello. The pups have their bowls. Anyway, yeah, really intriguing. Yeah, Michael, Grant and I, if we have any say, we're gonna have you. You're gonna have one of these in a couple of years. You're gonna be hitting it on the table, pointing at people. Yeah. So
Bankston did healing with humans, but he's like, it's anecdotal. He goes, first of all, it's anecdotal. He goes, second of all, you cannot prove that my healing technique healed these people. They could have changed their diet. They could have had some sort of, some change in their life where their immune system was boosted. So he goes, that's why I stick with mice. The mice are going to die in 27 days. If they don't, something anomalous is going on. It's really simple. You're just adding one different variable, and it's the healing. The mice gravitate towards the left hand. People are like, Grant's losing his mind. There's heat coming out of his left hand. The mice gravitate towards the left hand. No idea why. If you ask Bankston, he's like, I don't know. I don't know why. If the students are looking, the mice get healed. It's like, it's really, I love him because he's like, I don't know. If you think there's a problem with my experiments, if you think there's a flaw in my methodology, tell me. I'll fix it. I mean, he speaks in front of medical students. For me, he's one of the most important people that I've come across in a really long time. Grant, what were we going to say?
Yeah, and I'm losing my thought here. Chase, go ahead. I'll just jump in.
They can inject. So when the mice, and like Chase said, when the mice gets cancer, they can they heal them. This mice, you can inject the mice with cancer again. It will not get it. You can take the cells from that mouse, inject it into another mouse, try to give that mouse cancer. They will not get that cancer. So it's really amazing. I mean, and he works like I said, he works at Dean Radin. It's the most promising work, and he has to go to China, I think, because in the United States it's difficult with animal testing. They're really restrictive. He does get a little bit into the woo, like you said. Benjamin Mayrick taught him he showed him how he busted clouds, and most people are like, busting clouds. I'm like, I've never seen that. I'm open to it. It's more consciousness related. I don't know how it's a little different than curing mice in a lab under controlled conditions. Yeah. But his book, I will link to his book in the notes. His book, he reads it himself. he doesn't like read it word for word. He just tells a story. It's really good. And there's lots of interviews on YouTube. If you start watching people, I think you'll get addicted to him, because he's really, for me, the perfect kind of skeptic. He's like, you know, the skeptics we hear that just attack everything UFO wise. No, he's more, and he's open to all that stuff, remote viewing. Now I'm rambling. Somebody interrupt me.
Okay. Let me bring. I remember what I was going to say. The top healer that in Chicago that brings Bankston in once a year. I asked
Is that
her.
Bernadette?
She actually did a letter. What's that?
Bernadette?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She actually did a lecture, and the idea was what are the best clients you can get for Bankston healing? And she said animals and people with Alzheimer's. What is the connection? The connection is there's no left brain ego in either. The self is gone. And she said those are the easiest people to heal. And then when it comes to the cloud thing, either John Alexander said, or I heard someone said John Alexander can do that. I was at Mount Shasta with a guy. He's in my contact modality book. He's the guy that was in the float tank. He got all these messages in the float tank. And then he had this experience with his father when his father died, this very direct experience where his father's taking him through the house to find this one thing for his daughter. But I won't get into it. But we were at Mount Shasta. And then he says to me, hey, see those clouds up there? There's like clouds. There's 4 clouds, like in a square. He says, see those clouds there? I said, yeah. He said, watch the bottom left cloud. And I'm watching it, and it disappeared. And I just looked at him. I went, you did that? He goes, yeah. He never told anyone. And then I made it public, and he was really upset that I'd made it public that he was able to do this. But I couldn't believe it when the guy did it. And it happened in 6 or 7 seconds. This bottom cloud of these 4 clouds just disappeared. And I remember hearing about this, and I went, wow. This actually is something that people can do. I don't know what the benefit of it is, but it's pretty bizarre when someone actually does it for you and you're standing there. Then it's unmistakable.
The benefit would be if you're at an outside event and it's about to rain and you can make the clouds go away. And I'm sure, Michael, you're probably like thinking cloud busting, but yeah, I've heard when I read this in Bankston's book, I'm like, it's an interesting anecdote. This psychic was supposedly able to do it. I have a friend of mine saying the other day, a friend of mine says, you're not really going to believe this, but I'll tell you, I think there's something to cloud busting. I'm like, no, I've heard it from other people. I mean, I need to see it, of course. I've never seen it, so I don't know. We lost Chase. Hopefully he'll come back. If not, you guys have any closing thoughts on anything we spoke about?
Well, let me bring one more Bankston thing up about Benedict Merrick was extremely a strange sort of guy, but he was very effective. In the test that Bankston had given, if you remember, they had gone to the hospital and they'd given these cards and envelopes to the woman at the desk where they check in. So people would come in. All they would do is sign their name on a card, put it in the envelope, and all these envelopes were in this box. And after they had, I don't know, 20 or 30 or whatever it was, Bennett Merrick came in, and Bankston would hold up the card and he'd say, kidney disease. And he put it down, 100% accurate except for one. And he got one wrong, and they found out later that he was actually right. The doctors were wrong. They just misdiagnosed the guy. And that was one of the tests that Bankston had given him when he first got, because this guy had incredible powers to do all this bizarre stuff, and he taught it to Bankston. And one more, my last thought is always this thing about when it comes to consciousness. The basic thing in the woo world is remember who you actually are. You are not the actor on the stage. Because you played King Henry VIII in high school doesn't mean you're King Henry VIII for the rest of your life. We came here to play a role. We are an actor on a stage. We are playing an actor on a stage. We are not the actor on the stage. That's a big difference. So they are playing aliens and we are playing humans. And that's what we've got to remember is that in the end, we are these etheric beings that can play whatever role. And I have I don't know if you've ever interviewed him, UC Ronan, who wrote the book One. He's an Israeli experiencer. And he was told, I have it as the sort of the sign off on all my emails, where he was told these beings came into his room. They were green beings. And when they left, they held hands and they made a circle and they went round and round and round, faster, 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 faster. And he said suddenly they turned translucent. Then they turned into light. The light went into this little tiny ball. The ball disappeared. That's how they left. And the beings had told him, when we come to your world, we take on a form. We have to take a form to come into your world, but we do not have any form. We have to do it. You can do the same thing You just don't know it. And so that's the idea that you have to remember is we are all this etheric being and we are playing these roles. We'll come back. We may come back if you say grays are evil aliens. You may come back in your next life as a gray just to learn that experience. It's the idea that we're playing these different roles and we're supposed to learn in these roles. We are not this physical thing. We get caught into the illusion of believing we are whoever we are, and that's all we are. We have to realize the key thing in the woo world is remember who you actually are.
And I'm going to let you go now. Thank you for closing with that, Brant. And I will just add, I've told people this, UFOs to me are a path to other things like our abilities. And I think it's all about human abilities that we don't realize that we have. Basically, we're so much more capable than we realize. And I think that's where we're heading in the future, not just UFOs. I love UFOs, but I love human, what's the word? Not human capabilities, but I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank, but I think we're more capable than we've been taught, basically.
Yeah. And the other thing I would add is that you got to remember that if reincarnation is a fact, then you and I and Michael and Chase all came into the world and we probably decided we wanted to do something. So you may have decided you're coming in because the world's going to shift at this time with the UFO thing, and that what we're doing is what we were intended to do. So the idea is you came into the world to do something. The idea is to figure out, what did I come here to do? You don't worry about what anybody else is doing because you can't change it. And when you leave the world, all they're going to ask you is one question. And that was the Newton thing from 7,000 experiencers who talked about life between life. They only ask you one question. They say, Joe, how did it work out? Because you planned it. I planned it. So we planned to come into the world to do something. All we got to do is figure out, what are we here to do? And are we doing it? And I think that's important, that you and I have come in at this time in this place, that the world is about to shift and this reality is about to be made. And we came in to help shift the reality of what UFOs are and bring this to the world.
Thank you, Grant. And thank you for doing this. So
I appreciate it.
In the future, we'll definitely do something together. Just let me know.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Take it easy. Bye.
Yep.
Just me and you left. The final two. You know, people don't realize the reason we met was because of Wilson Davis. Michael was on Reddit speaking about Wilson Davis. I wrote him privately, and that was it. We actually got to meet. Were you here last year or the year before in Vegas?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. So yeah. Well, a lot of what Grant is talking about, I encountered when I first got into this. I was into metaphysics. I went to a metaphysical church. I mean, I read all the channeled books. I went to a lot of this stuff. And then I came back more towards, I wouldn't say mainstream, more nuts and bolts. And then I'm kind of in the middle right now. I'm really interested in everything else. Maybe not as much as what Grant is talking about there, but yeah, I'm interested in all of that. One of the books I was just found out about, this is something I think everybody's going to like, talking about what we might be dealing with, like the main intelligence here, talking about it's native, not necessarily native to Earth, but something that's always been around, even since before our existence. Really, really interesting. And they've both done interviews on YouTube. You could check out, I'll try to find that link. Mysterious Universe did an interview with Greg Little, and it's really good. Andrew Collins, Strieber just interviewed him. Great stuff. Definitely more on the consciousness side. Also deals with plasma, energy. It's just really good. I think you would like it too, Michael. Any thoughts before I let you go? Because 2 hours has been more than enough.
Well, actually, there are thoughts for maybe a future show or future opportunity to talk with Chase and Grant. And I didn't bring it up because you guys were obviously down a path of significant interest to people, and I found it really interesting. So I didn't want to interrupt, but I wanted to ask Chase, maybe next time if we could do this again, is I wanted to compare the explanation for how the triangle operates that he was given by the 3-star he mentioned. Compare that to my conversation in private with Lue Elizondo.
Oh, we didn't get to that. Yes, we did not get to that with Chase and his experience at TTSA also.
Yeah, and I'm going to bet right now that they are remarkably similar, if not the same. The other one I had was for Grant, when he was talking about Eric Davis and Eric Davis disputing Bob Lazar claims and Bob Lazar in general, talking about Area 51 in the first place. And I wanted to know from Grant, what was correlating the timelines for when Eric said that and when Bob Lazar first made his claim, because it would be, I think, sort of standard operating procedure. While Bob did not, while his coming out did not result in the compromising and the disclosure publicly of a program of record, a special access program, it certainly would have, and I'm in the camp that I believe more than I disbelieve things that Bob Lazar said.
How dare you?
Hey, throw your stones, but I have my reasons.
I'm in the middle on Lazar. I take stones from both sides.
Yeah, but number one, if I was the facility security manager, wherever this was located at, say, S4, as he claims, not at Area 51, those are two separate sites. But if I was the program manager and I was the government, the moment all of that started hitting the airwaves, they wouldn't be there much longer. And I think it's folly. You see occasionally people say, well, I've used Google Earth. I found the facility at S. That's not going to happen. They didn't, number one, the government controls satellite imagery used on Google Earth and everything else. Google Earth was a government program at one time, the technology behind it. So the government is screening and in control of all of this overhead technology that is the imagery collection that's going on, and they're going to mask any images of any sensitive sites that are grabbed during these overpasses. But if the program was in danger of thousands of people suddenly swamping the area out there like they did and potentially compromising the efforts, they would have relocated it. That's where the smart money would be anyway. You just, given the supposed sensitivity of this program, given all the smoke indicating that there's indeed something going on, they wouldn't have taken a chance of outing that program, and they would have relocated it. So I don't doubt that it's not there anymore. But yeah, I'd like to hear what what the timeline comparisons are for when Davis said that, and because Lazar came out in 89, 90, and 89. Davis didn't have it, and he didn't have his conversation with Wilson supposedly until the early 2000s.
That was the thing that really caught my eye about Lazar 89, and then the Wilson Davis documents where, well, it's not in the documents, but Eric Davis, I think, has said that the program. What did he say? It was in 1989. I know there's a 1989 connection. I would love it if Lazar was telling the truth. I don't know if he's telling the truth. I've told Eric I'm 50-50. He's totally not 50-50. He's 100% that he's a liar, but we'll see. I hope Eric is wrong. I mean, it's such a cool story, at the very least. If we have 9 craft, maybe they're our craft. Maybe they're from an archaeological dig. Maybe they're from gifts. I don't know. I want to change the subject just real quick. Any thoughts on the Calvin case? Are you aware about this case and the photograph?
I've been following it. So I arrived in the UK just a couple of years after. I mean, this was still in the tabloids when you go to the local Spar, which is like their 7-Eleven, or anywhere you'd see the tabloid papers. You'd see still discussions in 1993 about this stuff. So about UFOs in general. And then I didn't leave there until, well, basically 99. So I was, and then having heard Nick Pope talk about this for years, I mean, number one, for those that maybe don't think too much of Nick Pope, I mean, this totally validates everything he was saying about it, right? Right. All we need now is a good satellite picture of all the hangar bay doors on the side of the mountain to totally validate what Bob Lazar was saying, but that's probably not ever going to happen. So, but this, right? This this borders on like where people say, well, if just one of these UFO reports or incidents or encounters is true and proven, then they all must be true, or the vast majority of them, because that many people throughout the world cannot be absolutely bonkers with all the tens of thousands of UFO reports that are out there. And here we are. We're seeing a photograph, the original photograph that supposedly didn't exist anymore. And it shows not only something that's unexplainable, it shows something that's very explainable, which is a Harrier GR4 or some variant of it flying in the background, just as the witnesses said, just as Nick Pope said. And maybe that wasn't even the only Harrier there. It's the only one captured in the photograph. Apparently there was more than one. I think it's remarkable.
And then I know people are saying that they think it's some of the ideas are like it's a reflection, it's a mountain. The witnesses said it hovered for 10 minutes. There were two witnesses, alleged witnesses, gave statements, and then it shot straight up in the air. So people are saying the article in the Daily Mail written by David Clark, he's a very hardcore, very close, I would say, debunker. He spoke to somebody and he believes it was our technology, United States technology. And then they said they think it was the Aurora, but as far as I know, the Aurora just hovered for 10 minutes and then shoot straight up. I mean, obviously it's a mythological craft, so I don't know what it would or wouldn't do. I don't know. It's interesting. It's a great story. They dug and they found the picture, which is great, but I don't know if it's going to change anything, but it's really interesting.
Well, it's not the only interesting thing to come out of the UK. I forget the guy's name, but the oil company employee that was on the oil rig somewhere off the coast of Scotland, North Sea, and he looked up and saw what he thought was the aurora, or what speculators thought was the aurora, and it was escorted. He was on this. He was actually, as a qualified observer, he was or had been in the Royal Observer Corps, so he knew how to identify aircraft. That's the role. Aircraft, naval vessels, and whatsoever that might be out there, within the UK's airspace or off the coast. And so he knew what he was looking at, and he saw this triangular shaped aircraft that either there was a picture taken or it was an artist's impression of what he saw, but it was escorted. What I saw was a picture, because it would have been, in my opinion, too difficult for the artist to draw the two F-111 jets that were escorting it very closely off its wingtips, which is done oftentimes to mask the audible signature or the radar signature of the vehicle. And I'll give you an example. In the 1990s, I went down to RAF Mildenhall, which is not far from, it's in the same region as why can I never think of this? Rendlesham Forest and all of that. Went down there for an air show. They had an F-117 on static display there, along with all these other jet aircraft. They also had a B-2 overflight. They didn't allow it to land, but it was when it flew over, I saw it. All of us saw it. It was several miles off to the east, and it was just orbiting, waiting for its authorization to turn and come fly over the airfield and do its display. I didn't see them at the time, but as it got closer, two F-15s joined up right on its wingtip, like Blue Angel close, okay, and flew that way over the full length of the runway, so that all you heard was the sound of jet noise. You didn't get the distinctive whatever sound that B-2 bomber makes from its exhaust, and that was to mask its heat signature, its electronic signature, its optical signature, radar signature, basically to mask whatever it might be emitting that could have been detected by adversaries on the ground, of which there probably would have been several from Russia or wherever else, trying to get good photos of the B-2 back when it was in its sort of infancy. So this going back to this sighting out over the North Sea, this guy saw this. You can Google it and find a picture of it. It was a triangle-shaped jet of some sort that's never been unrolled or rolled out by the government to date. And it was flanked by two F-111 jets really, really close to it. So those are just, apparently at Boscombe Down, there was a I believe that article about what you were showing talked about this as well. There have been a lot of strange things happen at UK, at out of the way airstrips in the UK, because they are so isolated. I think the space shuttle, during the space shuttle program, one of its divert emergency runways was located in northern England or Scotland, just in case they had to abort and come down and land somewhere. So all of this, everything that's been said about all of that is all quite conceivable.
I have a question for you. Let's talk. So the theory came out on Twitter. The Tic Tac was a hypersonic missile. The Tic Tac was the X-43A scramjet. You explained on the phone to me the best I've ever heard for an explanation for that, why that's not the case. Can you just go through that again? Because I had never heard some of the details that you had shared.
Well, everything we know about hypersonic travel, and we know a lot because we've known about that since the V2 rocket that we got from Germany and its follow-ons in the space program. Things that we send into space achieve hypersonic velocity. So, not to go down the rabbit hole, but everything in the media nowadays is like we got to catch up with China and Russia, who are well advanced into hypersonics now, and you see all this lobbying on the Hill and new programs starting up for, to accelerate the research. Well, I think it's just a bunch of horse shit, because we would have been well schooled on the science of hypersonics going back to the dawn of the space age, because we were causing things to go that fast already. And the Tic Tac being an X-43 or any other hypersonic vehicle, there's one telltale attribute of hypersonics as we understand them that are so you say traditionally powered, right? With blowing something out the back, sucking in oxygen in the front, blowing something out the back. But that sucking in oxygen in the front, blowing exhaust out the back for hypersonics doesn't occur until you go through a boost phase. So you have to have a booster. So the X-43 is a flight vehicle designed to fly at very high Mach and withstand the very high air friction temperatures that can literally melt it while it's flying through the air. But it gets there. Its engine, its technology doesn't work until it achieves a certain medium to high Mach number in the first place to get it going and get it started, so that it's particularly well-designed constrictive engine that's taking in this thin air at altitude. It has to be going super fast to compress that air for detonation, to blow the exhaust out the back, all right, to sustain its flight. It gets there by having a rocket booster attached to the back of it, which leaves what? A trail. So someone's trying to that the Tic Tac is a hypersonic vehicle. Yet the description from Fravor and the others is that this thing was bouncing around, changing directions like a ping pong in a glass jar, ping pong ball in a glass jar. Well, each one of those vector changes that they observed would have had to have been, each time it came to a stop, to get it to hypersonic velocity, it would have needed to be boosted. If you're talking about a hypersonic technology engine, right? And so that takes a booster. You would see a sign of an ignition of a booster, the burning of the booster, the exhaust trail of the booster. The booster would then drop off. This thing would go in that direction it was propelled. And then if it wanted to, stop in mid-flight, turn around and now boost itself again, what they were observing had no obvious signs of propulsion. Okay, so and plus, hypersonic testing, hypersonic vehicles operate at high altitude where the air is really thin. You can't move, we can't, with traditional air vehicles, aircraft, jets, rockets, missiles, can't move for sustained periods of time in the lower atmosphere at those speeds without burning up. So when they launched the X-43A, they strap it to the wing pylon of a B-52, and they take it up to some considerable, multiple thousands of feet, and they drop it from the wing. The booster on the back ignites and accelerates it. And you can look this up. I don't know whether it takes it to Mach 3, 4, 5, whatever. And then the hypersonic vehicle begins to operate on its own, and the booster drops off. And then in the case of the X-43, it flew for several seconds before it achieved its mission objectives and shut off and crashed into the ocean as designed. So I don't think for 1 second that the Tic Tac, what they were seeing was a hypersonic, X-43A type vehicle.
What happens to the craft afterward? You said it was like all melted almost.
Well, if you look at the B-70 bomber, the Valkyrie that was developed back in late 60s or 70s, it was perhaps a precursor to the B-1V Blackjack bomber, and it was designed to cruise at a very high Mach. And in flight testing, when they landed, I mean, you can see it. It's got scorched tips on the tails and on the horizontal stabilizers. It was going so fast, it literally was about to catch fire on the edges of its control surfaces. When in Desert Storm, in the combat pilots in F-16s and F-15s, when they're orbiting around just doing their air defense mission, and they're called up by the AWACS, hey, and there are lots of cases of where this occurred. We have a bogey at 41 miles northeast of your position. We have troops on the ground in danger. That could be, we know what aircraft that is. It could be carrying bombs to bomb our troops. They vector this jet to go shoot it down. And there's multiple cases in Iraq where we did that. And these pilots would accelerate to well beyond Mach 1, and their feet get hot, literally, down in the bottom of the cockpit because of the airflow, the friction going around the nose of that jet. And they're cruising, 1,100, 1,200 miles an hour, trying to get wherever it is they need to go very quickly to engage this target. And the jet heats up, right? And that's only at 1,200 miles an hour. What if you're doing Mach 6, Mach 7, right? You're gonna begin to glow. At some point, there's going to be a plasma envelope that develops around the front of that thing. When you watch, and Fravor and company, they didn't report any of that, right? So whatever this was unconventional.
Right.
Is my point. I could go on.
No,
and on.
No, I'd never heard some of the details you had shared. It was interesting. I never gave it any really weight, those theories, but I wanted you to talk about that. I'm going to let you go, and then I'm going to go over the Bankston stuff a little bit from what I know for like 15 minutes. If you have any final thoughts or not, I'll let you go, and we'll do something soon. We have to do that show on Paul Hill's book, because I really think that is a really important book.
Yeah, I think a lot of that ties back into some of the things. It's to the nuts and bolts side, right? For the people who are interested more in the consciousness side, all of which I am a fan, and interested in learning more, and have read quite a bit about all of that. It probably won't scratch their particular itch, but I think it's all related.
No, I'm definitely interested. I'm interested in it.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure, Joe. Once again.
Yeah, Michael, thank you again, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for taking the time.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. I just want to explain Bankston a little better, since I'm so obsessed with Bankston, because I think it's important. So he met a psychic. He was younger. He was working at this pool. It was in Long Island, I think. And he met this, he heard that there was a psychic around. He was a lifeguard, Bankston. He meets this guy, and he's like, come on, psychic, give me a break. So the guy gives him readings. Turns out really accurate, his readings. And so Bankston starts doing work with him, or they're doing readings. I don't think they were charging at all. He tried to get him to charge, but he wouldn't. And I may be wrong on that. One day, Bankston's like, my back really hurts. And he's like, oh, yeah, what do you want me to do with it? And at that point, I think people were getting healed. Like he would do a reading, and then somehow the people he was doing a reading for, they would get healed. And Bankston's like, my back is hurting. The guy, Benjamin Mayrick, said, what do you want me to do about it? And Bankston's like, fix it. You're healing all these other people. Put his hands on Bankston's back, heals his back pain. Bankston said he's never had back pain again in his entire life. So make a long story short, they get this experiment set up. I think it was Queens College, and the guy's name was, who he was working with at the college was, I forget. Everything's set. Benjamin Mayrick is going to be the healer. Not long before the experiment. And, they had to get the mice in place, everything, not easy. Couple of days, whatever, before the experiment, the psychic Benjamin Mayrick says, you know what? I don't want to do this. Sorry. He's like, we worked on this. What are you doing with this? This is something it took a lot of work to get this together. He's like, I'm not interested. Sorry. End of their relationship pretty much. So Bankston, forget the guy's name. Bankston is convinced to do the healing. He's like, I'm not a healer. They're like, well, you're going to have to try it. We have the mice, so let's do it. So he starts doing it, and they inject the mice with this cancer, and the mice start developing these big tumors. And Bankston's still doing it. Yeah. And Bankston might call it energy healing on his book, but he has no idea if there's any energy involved, because he goes, if it's energy and then there's a distance, and the further you get away from your subject, then the healing should diminish, but it doesn't. So he does not think it's healing, does not think it's energy involved. So he's doing the experiment, and the tumor is getting bigger. He's like, let's just end this. The mouse is in pain. Come on, it's suffering. Let's end this. And the guy's like, just keep going. Next day, tumor's getting bigger. Bankston's like, listen, and the guy's like, look at the eyes. The mice may have a larger tumor, but the eyes, seems like the mice is fine. Keeps doing the technique that Benjamin Mayrick taught him. Tumor implodes, mice is cured of cancer. So that's basically it. Study after study after study he's done, and the mice get cured. You need to check out, I linked to one of his interviews in the notes. You'll see there's so many interviews by him. There's also a lot of lectures he's given, some at medical schools in front of medical students. And like I said, he's like, if you see a problem with my methodology for my experiments, just tell me and I'll address it. But nobody ever can find one. He's just adding one variable to a very well-known study with mice that are injected with mammary cancer, and they will die within 27 days. Add the one different variable, which is his technique, and the mice live. Most of the mice live 2 years, which is their normal lifespan. That shouldn't happen. Like I said, there are two big names in this community that know of this work, are very impressed by this work, and they're like, just keep replicating it, keep looking into it. The community doesn't want anything to do with it, but it's so much data. There's so much data. You can go to his bankstonresearch.com. We want data in the UFO world. We don't really have it, not in the public realm, except for anecdotal and home videos, which are usually less than impressive. The government data we don't have. We have 3 videos, which are not enough to get the masses interested. They were talking earlier about, I think it was Grant who said, the New York Times put out the 3 videos in the article, and the public response was like, no big deal. That's because that's not enough. That's not enough. If we got the real data that supposedly exists in these special access programs, and it's clear as day, we see craft making 90-degree turns. We have F-18 pilots saying, yeah, I was there. It was on my wing, and then it shot up into the sky. If we get that, then it'll become real for a lot more people. And then if we have a crash retrieval program, and if some miracle we find out about it publicly, and they can show us the craft and the bodies that allegedly exist, that would make it real for people. Then I would like to see how the public responds. But right now, when Lue says disclosure has already happened, no, it hasn't. I mean, I understand what he's saying, but the masses do not accept that disclosure has happened. As far as Johnny, it's real. There's no doubt it's real. I mean, when you look at the experiment, when you listen to Bankston, the guy is very, very smart. The guy is like I said, he's a statistician, a sociologist. He's accepted the fact that people won't accept this. People in his field, and he calls it the boggle factor. Some things people are able to accept as reality, but everybody has their limit to where they go. Some people are like, yeah, UFOs are real nuts and bolts craft. And if you take it to consciousness, they're like, nope, don't want anything to do with consciousness. Take it to another, then there are people that are interested in all of that. Take it to Bigfoot, like Bigfoot, I'm out of here. Take it to the next level. Healing, done. So there's the boggle factor is about different levels of acceptance depending on who it is. Tom, I agree, Tom. Disclosure has not happened. I understand Lue is saying disclosure that UAP, unidentified phenomena, are in our aircraft, in our airspace. Yeah, that's happened, but the masses don't accept it. So we're not even close. I don't think we're even close to seeing how the masses would react to some anomalous intelligence in our midst, in our presence. And until that happens, I don't think you can say the public is fine with it. As Christopher Mellon said to John Podesta, when John Podesta said the American people could handle the truth, Chris Mellon said, how could you say the American people can handle the truth when we don't know what the truth is yet? It kind of doesn't make any sense, which I agree with Mellon. And that was a few years ago, which I used to tweet the heck out of that. Yes, I think so too. So many avenues to go down that will lead us to a new understanding of life. I hope it's cool, or at least better than this chaos. Yeah. That's why that book I mentioned, I put up, talks about, it's really interesting, talking about this other world and these other beings, if you can call them, other intelligences that shamans would try to communicate for their community back then. And they talk about how the trickster, the trickster element in all of this. It's funny. Mick West says, oh, Jacques Vallée talks about the trickster. It's like it's trickster being. No, it's not a trickster being. It's just something that is part of certain cases. A trickster element where it's, it seems like it's leading you down the wrong path. So this book by Little and Collins talks about how, and it's Little that said he believed that the shaman would encounter this trickster. And, once you get past the trickster and whatever this intelligence is, believes that your intentions are pure and not selfish, it will take you to more information that is very usable for your community. And that's where we, this is definitely, for a lot of people, this is woo-woo stuff. But for me, it's really interesting. And that's what I want to go. I want to go down that path. I love the UFO stuff, but this other stuff is more important to me, especially cancer. If you can cure cancer using that technique, yeah, it's more important than UFOs, of course. UFO nuts are not going to bail us out. No, I don't think so either. It's going to be up to us. I don't think they care either way, but I need to read that book. And I've also had the opinion, when you read John Keel, he talks about this intelligence, and Semivenice talked about it too. It lies to you. It cajoles you. It sometimes it heals people. Sometimes it hurts people. I don't know. It's hard to figure out what the hell its intentions are, if anything. And in that book, they do bring up Carl Jung and the archetypes, and that it's actually a real thing. And I don't want to talk more about it until I read it and have a better grasp of it. But they're like, if you read Carl Jung's book, which I have not, he didn't think it was just some mythical archetype part of us. He thought it was more than that. But like I said, first of all, I need to read that book, and I need to read the book that I put up earlier. If you guys have any questions, I know it's hard when I have a guest on, especially 3, to get to all the questions. The chat was going so fast, I could not keep up with it. I'm not really sure what you mean that it is different. It's though, that's why. I'm not really sure. You want to rephrase that, I'll address it, Joe. I know that if I veer off of nuts and bolts, you lose a percentage of the audience. But I know nuts and bolts does. I know consciousness does really well with viewers, but that's not why I do it. I mean, somebody like David Wilcock, he is so out there. He has a massive audience. They love that stuff. I'm not doing that unless I believed it 100%. I would talk about it, but I'm not going to do something just to get viewers or to get to make money. Basically, I blocked everybody I think I saw everybody who was taking shots. So I could use somebody to go through questions. Is that what mods do also? So yeah, I definitely could use help. It's a lot of stuff to do the blog, to do YouTube and Twitter. Thanks, Rhino. I'm grounded. I just love, I don't think, we're just physical beings. So that's why I delve into the consciousness stuff. I've taken remote viewing classes. I've seen it work for myself, even though it wasn't spectacular data. Ex-wife did it. Both ex-wives took classes with me. They both did well. First one is a natural psychic. She did really well. To say it implies it's all one thing. I'm sure many different things with different agendas. Maybe. I don't know. I go back and forth. I did ask somebody on the inside, what do you think? And they said it's contradictory. And they used the word, it's a shit show. And I've said that before. Really smart person. There is a difference between consciousness studies and fake stupidity. I think that's a reference to the say some shit Wilcox stuff when he told his wife to say that. Tom, do you think Congress is going to look into the Wilson documents? Yes, 100%. But I tell people, as much as I want the Wilson documents to be validated, I mean, they've been validated for me. The big question is not Wilson Davis. It's more the people in the programs on, are they going to speak out and are we going to get to hear from them? It's like, if they talk to the Aero office and we don't get to hear about it, that sucks. I mean, that's not really going to be there's no satisfaction in that for us. I want to hear from the people. I want them to be whistleblowers, which is probably not going to happen. It would be great if somebody just says, you know what, I'm just going on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC in our dreams. But right now I'm going to go on Tucker Carlson and I'm going to spill my guts and I'm going to talk about the crash retrieval program. I don't care what anybody else has to say. This is so important for humanity. That's allegedly why Lazar went public, if you believe his story. I know, this is, and back to that. Yes, Gallagher isn't letting it go, but I think Eric Davis has given them all the information they need. I believe they've located the crash retrieval program. The next step is up to Congress and up to the Aero office. So let's see what happens. I know this. I'm just saying wording. Yeah, I know wording, but that's fine. Demons. My gambling is not up for discussion. My demons. But demons, yeah. I mean, maybe some of the stuff that Keel talks about that's natural to this planet, that's been here forever. Some of it acts demonic. I think that's what's going on. Really hard to figure out what the hell that's all about. Who has had the fear of God beaten into them, Tom? Who? Explain that one to me. Let's see. My father was over the top, so I said that to him. He would say you were full of BS and all that psi stuff was garbage. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who think psychic abilities, known as psi or telepathy, it's all that stuff, is nonsense, which I do not believe. They're fairies, and some of them like to play with you. And it's funny because that book I was talking about talks about how they wouldn't just take the form of something that was common at the time. They would actually interact with your consciousness and your expectations. That's why people would see fairies back then. Now we expect technology. So it's not just that they take that form. It's interacting with your intentions and what you expect to see. Allegedly, that's one of those programs. That's what that book is talking about. Some UFOs are humans with demonic assistance. Yeah, I have no idea if that's true. Yeah, I'm responding to it, Joe. That's fine. I mean, there's a lot of theories out there. I mean, I have theories, but I'll never say this is what's going on or that's what's going on. There are people that do that, and it's like a turnoff to me on Twitter. They're like, by the way, these beings are using these craft, and this is how they get around the universe, and that's what's going on. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what else I can say to that, but interesting theory, maybe. I am hungry. Let's see, 2 hours and 40 minutes. I will keep going since there's 143. If you have any questions, or I can ramble incoherently for the next 20 minutes. I would go work for Bankston and give up all UFO interest if he could pay me enough to pay bills and it was in a city that I like to be in, because I think that work is really important. I mean, curing cancer, come on. And I understand people are upset by, oh, somebody did ask me. I've had people ask me about him, and I said, go to this person, look into it. No guarantees. There are no guarantees this is going to work whatsoever. If you think you need radiation, regular treatment, do it. Bankston says that if you get radiation or chemotherapy, it doesn't work. Well, he also said he has students that have learned his technique and they have no problem in curing people of cancer, even after they've gotten radiation and chemo treatments. Like I said, though, that's human tech, it's anecdotal. It's anecdotal. The mice are not anecdotal. Humans are for now. I mentioned this earlier. George Knapp has people within the DoD willing to come forward regarding UAP crash retrieval and technology. He doesn't have people. I think he's heard from folks in the know that that's going on. So yeah, I had that tweet. I haven't pulled up the audio yet from his coast to coast appearance with Chris Sharp. It was last week, I think. So yeah, George is in contact with some really interesting people and sources. Me personally, I have not heard that. I don't have anywhere near the contacts that he has. Maybe 1,000th, if that. Oh, that was there are people that have amazing abilities, and then there are people who don't have amazing abilities. I think it runs the gamut, just like any a talent, instrumental talent, sports talent. There's only certain amount of people who could hit 400, a handful. It's just like, any other talent. Some people have a little bit of it. Some people have a lot of it. They are like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Pick the form of your destroyer. It could be something like that. I don't think it's all of that, but yeah, if it's interacting with our expectations and consciousness, we could be the ones who are driving what form they take. I'm not sure if that's everything that's going on. That may be just one part of it. Maybe we chose fairies because the non-witnesses couldn't believe the primary witnesses. Maybe. I don't know. Gnomes, fairies, humans were in the late 1800s were showing up. Their craft was in trouble. Okay, could you give us some water? That kind of stuff was going on. You had the contactees, which they may all have had real experiences, but it may have been something that was either created for their reality, manipulating their perceptions, or it was something that they had expected, and the phenomenon was using that to show its not true form, but the form they expected. Have you tried the technique from his book? It's pretty straightforward. I've had interesting results. I have. I did have one person ask me to try healing on their mom, and I did. I never heard back from them, but I'm a beginner, so it's not somebody, I'm like, once again, don't rely on me. But what people don't know, and which I did not talk about because it's even more controversial, is he claims that when you go through the list of 20, you come up with a list of 20 things that you want. Just an example of how you come up with each one. If I have a broken leg and I want to be able to heal that leg, so I'm running around, I don't concentrate on the leg. The image I come up with and I write it down is an image of me running. So if that is true, that means my leg is not broken. So that's what you do. If you want money, you don't think of money. You think of what you would have if you had money, just like a nice house, or you're eating out at restaurants you like. So that's how it is. You make 20 of those and you have an emotion attached to it. It doesn't have to be positive. It can be negative. Any emotion affects it. And he's not the first one who has said that with manifesting techniques. And I know a lot of people think manifesting is nonsense. Whatever. The manifesting technique heals mice. I don't care what people say. The studies are there. He claims you get things on your list by doing that technique. Whether or not that's true, that's pretty much impossible to prove. You would not be able to prove. I guess if you did it over and over and over again, you were getting things on your list. I had some experiences with it. It seemed like it worked, but who the hell knows if my cycling was what helped my, I had a couple of health problems that disappeared. I don't know. I didn't get the convertible I wanted. I'm not a big car person, but I wanted a convertible because years ago, I had rented a car in the beach, LA, Manhattan Beach, and it was so nice. And Vegas during the non-summer times is great. So I just wanted even a used convertible, just something where I had to top up. Didn't get it. I personally think your frequency will attract the types of beings that resonate. That very well could be the case. Yeah, I've heard that so many times through studying basic metaphysics, and that is definitely connected to, you read some of those books from the old days, Think and Grow Rich, and there's a lot of books like that. Mitch Horowitz is such a great resource for manifesting down to earth. I've taken one of his classes in LA. It was really great. It was like a 3-hour lecture. The person I brought with me had never heard something specifically like that. And she's like, this is life-changing information. So it was really great. There are groups that get together on practice Bankston cycling. Yeah, I need to get a group because I have not done it. Just like I never followed up with my remote viewing practice. My thoughts on Whitley. He's the one that introduced me to that book I was talking about earlier, which I'll put in the notes later. I think Whitley's had real experiences. I don't know if he embellishes it all with his, he's an amazing fiction writer. He was before his experiences. Good night, Tom. So I like Whitley. I went to Malibu a couple of years ago and he was lecturing in somebody's house. There was like 20 people. It was like $20. It was great. I mean, it was such a great atmosphere. The weather was perfect. And he just spoke about his experiences. I have a whole blog. I think I transcribed the whole thing. I taped it. Yeah. I don't know if I manifest, but I'm interested in it. Travis Taylor gets a lot of heat for talking about The Secret. The Secret is very Hollywoodish. That's why Mitch Horowitz is such a better resource if you're interested in that stuff. And I do realize a lot of people think it's nonsense, which is fine. I can't prove any of that, but I'm interested in it. If there's something to the quantum physics double slit experiment where maybe instead of a measuring device is affecting the experiment, maybe we're affecting the experiment and it's not just on a quantum level, it's on a macro level too. I don't know. Lue talks about quantum physics, so definitely interested in it. Have you ever read the book Childhood's End? I have not. Childhood's End. It's an interesting theory. The cycling is mainly to distract you and let healing happen. It keeps your ego out of the way. And that's how remote viewing works. Putoff and Swan and other folks came up with a technique to distract you. So when you're going through these mundane things, you're tapping your paper and you're saying colors, textures, sounds, all of a sudden stuff pops into your head and you're like, oh, I just imagined that. So you write it down, you say it out loud, blue, large, dirt, sandy, salty. That's how it works. And then you check, and a lot of times you're accurate. Although a lot of times my stuff was garbage. I would not give my credit for an accurate remote viewing. I was very tough on myself, which is the way you should be. Have you watched Chuck Missler and his lectures on UFO phenomena vis-a-vis watchers, Nephilim, God, Satan? I have not. I have to remember this stuff. I guess I can go back. Chuck Missler, I'll write it down. It's hard for me to keep up with every suggestion, so I might not get it. I'm interviewing somebody in September. I'll say it here. It's not a secret. I just want to be able to read her book before I'm done. So I'm interviewing Emma Woods, who has had her lifelong experiences, and she had negative experiences allegedly with David Jacobs. I think you guys are aware of that case. So I'm going to interview her. That's early September. I just need to read her book, and she'll take questions related to her book. We're not going to focus on Jacobs. It'll come up, of course, but not going to focus on what happened and the accusation of improper, I wouldn't say behavior, but improper research techniques on Jacob's part. Let me get rid of some of the not trolls. I guess it's bots. Let's see. Maybe you didn't get that convertible because the universe gives you what you need and not what you want. That could be the case. It's funny because the Bankston stuff, there's so many interesting details to the Bankston stuff. He's like, the more aggressive the cancer, the more quick it gets healed. So it's the energy, quote unquote, energy within the system drives it. And it's more about the person getting healed, not the ability of the healer. And the more mice that are part of the group that are getting that you're attempting to heal, the quicker it happens, the more robust the effect is. So it's not more healers. I've been to meditation conferences. I used to work. They would have a whole bunch of healers, like 8 healers around the person. But Bankston's like, no, it's more about more people who want to get healed is more important. You can have 1 healer and then 50 people who need healed. That should work better if the mice results, translate into human results. Not more healers, more people, more healees. So that would be the mice needing healing. It's need. It's the need of the person, the need of the mice, the need of the mouse or the mice. Sorry, my mouth's getting dry. I know bots are. I never experienced bots like that, Kurt. I know it's like I wanted. So it was Joe Dispenza who was very popular. I was working camera for his healing conferences. They weren't just healing; they were, I'd say, healing / manifesting. They were great, and I got to meditate with them because the lights would go out. There was no camera work to do, so I got to do that. I got paid. I don't do those anymore because they changed the way they were shooting those. But yeah, I wanted to say, and I wasn't able to approach him. Don't have a whole bunch of healers. Have one healer with all the people getting healed. Put 100 people in here with maybe 10 healers and see what happens. But I wasn't able to approach him on that. Is the one who leaked them on this interview? Yes, early on. There really wasn't much to it, and I wouldn't even call it a leak. He put them online because Grant asked him. Grant gave them to Chase. I don't know if Grant specifically asked him, but Chase put them on Imgur, and then they made it to Reddit and then Twitter. I don't even think the original leak from the Edgar Mitchell estate is a leak. You know, they made their way out of the estate because Edgar Mitchell died. The spaceman who was close to Edgar Mitchell got all of his belongings related to UFOs and space and psychic, phenomenon that Edgar Mitchell was interested in. James Rigney met the spaceman, was able to make photocopies. Grant met Rigney in 2018 at a conference in Laughlin, Nevada, about an hour and a half from here. Grant got copies. Chase found out. Chase put them on Imgur. So that's what happened. Not really a leak. No problem, Mark. You go early on. We didn't spend too much time on Wilson Davis, which is fine. I mean, I'll answer as many questions as people want. I have my own sources that I have no doubt they're legitimate. And Eric Davis interviewed Wilson, even though Wilson denies it. And his denials are really, really good. Evangelical faith healers, any stats? I don't have any stats, but I wouldn't be surprised if some people do get healed. Where is that healing coming from? I don't know. I don't think every person who claims to be healed is lying. I don't think it's some God interfering and saying, we're going to heal you now. So I don't think that's what's going on. But it's possible in that scenario, people are getting healed. We still don't know how it works. Bankston talks about Reiki and other healing techniques. He's like, yeah, I don't know. He goes, all I know is my healing technique works. And he learned it from Benjamin Mayrick, who was a psychic, who then also learned to heal. And then Grant said he learned it. Supposedly, Benjamin Mayrick believed he was from Alpha Centauri. I've read that in the book. Bankston also goes a little woo at the end, talking about the fellas. He would see them barely with other people, and it was almost like sparkling. It's almost like these intelligences are from some other dimension, and occasionally they would show themselves. And Bankston's like, I don't know if they're real or if they're just a figment of my imagination or it's part of my higher self. Whatever the case, it was interesting. I liked seeing him go there when he's talking about multiple witnesses, which we all want multiple witnesses. These things, whatever they were, showing up. The fellas. I've tweeted that whole story from the book on Twitter. If you type in @the UFO Joe and fellas, you might be able to find that, or I'll retweet it tonight. Gary Nolan talks about artifacts he places on the table when talking with people like Valet. It isn't something that works. With crash retrievals, reverse engineering is not possible because it doesn't work. Yeah, maybe it's a whole big scam by whatever this intelligence is to make us think that we can reverse engineer the craft. Meanwhile, there's no way in hell we'll ever reverse engineer it. It's just, for whatever reason, they're tricking us. Grant thinks it's because we don't know how to use consciousness to control the vehicles. Maybe. I also like the theory that the technology will never work because it was never intended to work. It's just intended to get us thinking, or somebody's just playing a cosmic joke on us. I think John Keel has used cosmic joke in his book. Now I'm losing my mind. John Keel's book, man, I'm losing it. Do you think there is an inner circle within the government that knows the truth and is running interference and muddying the waters as much as possible to shape disclosure for their benefit? Short answer, very possible that I do think there are people in the programs, especially the people who run the programs, who know a hell of a lot more than us. Will Miller has talked about different control groups that control different aspects of the phenomenon. I think it would be a very small amount of people. Lue Elizondo has talked about, people, and it's in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, where Lue says he knows his close colleague has encountered people who, have had their data stolen, UFO related data. They confiscate it and they intimidate people. Is that connected to that? And then you have Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. We're talking about that happened in a North Georgia case where these people, it was traced back to Homeland Security. So is that really a black budget project? I mean, maybe it is within Homeland Security. I don't know. I do think that's certain people know what's going on and they do not want this out. Gary Nolan knows more than he is saying, but I think he does. He is one of the horsemen that will carry that tells. Yeah, 100%. Nolan knows more than he can say. How much more, I don't know. But that interview with Tucker Carlson should get more. That needs to be mainstream, not on some behind a paywall. Even though people aren't gonna, half the country's not gonna watch Tucker Carlson anyway. But what about Merkaba? Yeah, I don't know Merkaba physics. No need for ET tech. Maybe our DNA is as far as the ET tech goes. I mean, what's interesting on DNA is that book I talked about. They say that these plasma, at a certain point, they turn into the double helix and it splits into two, and then it replicates and replicates and replicates. I'm sorry, I can't answer that, Joe. I don't know. Above my pay grade. Or are we trying to figure out how a car works and all you have is a piece of a broken muffler? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, Will Miller thinks we've cracked gravity and we can travel any place, any time in the universe. Chase was, he believes it's we have craft that we've back engineered related to whatever technology we have from them, in his opinion. I think he says very possible it was back engineered from them. Was it John Keel that likened UFOs to being like us teasing a cat with a laser pointer? I think so. And it's like, let us catch the laser already in my lifetime. I mean, maybe it's trying to get us to evolve to a higher level. I don't know. And if we do get hurt or killed in the process, well, they may be thinking, well, there's life after death. Who cares? I don't know. But I started reading that book, and I've heard people talk about plasma before. It's not really new. People on Twitter were talking about it. It's mentioned in that book. Not that it represents the intelligence, but it's maybe some way for the intelligence to communicate through that plasma to us. I'm still not sure of the theory of what they're saying, but I will definitely interview them because they connected to Keel, and I love Keel. If I could, I think I want to take a 30-hour drive and listen to. And by the way, people are like, you shouldn't listen to just John Keel. It's negative. It's scary. We have enough scary things in this world. I'm like, I don't just read Keel. It's just lately I've liked Keel. I started reading books in 96 when I first got into this, and a lot of them were positive, channeled books. They're here to help us, all of that stuff. I don't think that's the case. I hope that's the case. You hear Bankston talk about the fellas. I hope they're positive. Who knows? Maybe are they connected to the same intelligence that, people get injured, like in the story in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. The daughter and her father are driving in Bend, Oregon, and she sees these orbs off in the distance. And it's funny because in that other book I mentioned, they suggest maybe once this phenomenon recognizes that you recognize it comes to, it gravitates towards you, and then it won't leave you alone. Maybe that's the Skinwalker thing. Driving down the highway, Bend, Oregon, Ron Becker, his daughter, she notices these orbs. They come into the car. One of the orbs goes through his arm. He gets cancer. That night he has a dream. They say, we're going to fix this. Well, he got cancer. They didn't fix anything. She goes back home to the East Coast in Connecticut, has poltergeist-like activity. So what the heck is going on? Is this thing so it can't control itself where it doesn't realize it's going to hurt a human? It goes into the car. Maybe it's not really totally self-controlled, intelligent like we think. Maybe there's some intelligence there and it feeds off of us. I don't know. But there's obviously radiation involved. Some people will say, well, then if it's radiation, it's got to be human tech. I don't think so. I think whatever this is can be radioactive too, especially if we're dealing with plasmas, which I am no expert at. Keel is pretty amazing and possibly insightful. What do you think attributed to his potential insight? I don't know. I mean, it's amazing. That book came out in 70. Gary Nolan told me to read it. Thank God for Gary telling me to read that. Eric Davis, I told him about it. He's like, oh yeah, I read that in 8th grade. So I'm a little behind the curve. I don't know why John Keel was able to put 2 and 2 together. I think he figured out a lot of what may be going on. All right, I'm at 3 hours. I appreciate all of you sticking with me. 130 for me is a lot. I know it was like 160 earlier, but that's because we had guests. Hopefully Chase is all right. I did not hear back from him. Probably just busy. And I'd have all of those folks on again. Definitely Chase, I want to delve into his personal experiences a little bit more. All right, guys, have a good night. I am going to call it I wanted to get Grant to talk about WoW, which I've been skeptical about, but after reading that book, I started, maybe it is they're trying to get our attention. It doesn't mean it's always going to be a positive outcome, but I'm more open to that theory than before. All right, guys, once I pull up my banner, I will end the night and eat dinner. Thanks for I think there were 2 super chats, so I appreciate that very much. And I am calling it a night. Last comments. Henry, you missed everything. Grant Cameron levitated. It was unbelievable. Jonathan, thank you. Yeah, but you can watch it right now. Go back to the beginning. I didn't take questions earlier because there was too many. The chat was so fast. All right, guys. Have a good night. Thanks again. Oh, and if you want to help like the video, I don't usually say that, but like it, and that's it. Oh, subscribe. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Have a good night.